Maybe it's a function of everybody being muted, but EJ, I just want to make sure or Layla we'll just unmute ourselves at the appropriate time for the 343 Madison piece.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, there you are.
We're just going over making sure we have quorum, and we're going to be able to start the meeting in a few seconds, hopefully.
Great. Thank you.
All right, and we do have quorum for both committees. Let me open up the meeting, and then I will turn it over to my colleague EJ Kalafarsky, who is the chair of the Transportation and Environment Committee. Let me start by saying that my name is Layla Logizico. I'm the chair of the Land Use, Housing, and Zoning Committee of Community Board 5. We are here tonight joined by our friends and colleagues of the Transportation and Environment Committee of CB5 to review an application for redevelopment of the building on in the Vanderbilt Corridor subdistrict. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed. The applicant will be given an opportunity to give a full and uninterrupted presentation. Once this presentation concludes, members of both committees will have an opportunity to ask questions. Once this question period concludes, we will open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. The applicants will have an opportunity to address those questions and comments. Then we will move to business session, and during business session, only members of the committees are allowed to discuss the matter. I want to mention from the get-go that this is a ULURP application. It was certified by the Department of City Planning, I believe, on the 3rd of May, so 2 days ago. Typically, as you know, community boards are given 60 days to review these matters. Given the breadth of this application, and given that it is actually the first application for a new development project in the Vanderbilt Corridor, that was recently rezoned. As you know, it's sort of like the little sister to the East Midtown subdistrict. We want to make sure that we take as much time as we are allowed to. So we should not feel any pressure tonight to actually come to a conclusion. I think that you have probably all felt a little overwhelmed, reviewing the documents and opening those PDF after PDF. And digesting all this material. So, if members of the committee, if we feel that we're ready to make a decision, by all means we will, but just wanted to make it clear from the get-go that we have the opportunity to actually take a vote at the next session. I would mention, as usual, members of the committee, if you have a conflict, you should disclose it before you make any comments. And you should vote present but not entitled. Other than that, then I will turn it to my colleague EJ Kalafarsky, who is the chair of the Transportation and Environment Committee, for his introduction remarks. EJ.
Thank you, Layla. I think you hit on a lot of the major points of our first item tonight. I'm EJ Kalafarsky, the chair of the Transportation and Environment Committee for Community Board 5, here with my vice chair, Sam Levy, as well. As was stated, the 341, 347 Madison Avenue application tonight is the joint item on the agenda for which the Transportation and Environment Committee will be joining in joint committee. The Transportation and Environment Committee will be dismissed after that item for the remainder of the land use, housing, and zoning agenda. And as Layla stated, we have 60 days, I believe, from Monday, 2 days ago, to weigh in on this. And as Layla said, we can see how the conversation is going tonight and whether or not the members of the joint committee believe that it makes sense to vote and formulate a position and move forward with taking a position on behalf of the board this month. If we decide to continue the conversation, to continue collecting information over the 60-day period, we will have other opportunities, particularly in the next community board month cycle for CB5, to continue that discussion and maybe defer taking a position for one more month. We have plenty of time, and we have another cycle of meetings with which to come back together as a joint committee. Excuse me. There are, frankly speaking, other reasons for our committees to come back together in the coming months as well. So there'll be ample opportunity.
Actually, I would like to take the opportunity to break the news to members of the Land Use Committee. Please note that the June meeting will be joint with T&E, as it is our understanding that the Grand Hyatt will be certified and it will be reviewed by both committees. As T&E has been very gracious to join Land Use in the previous joint sessions, I just wanted to let you know that we will actually visit our friends of T&E this time around. So members of the Land Use Committee, please make a note of it. We will most likely have 2 meetings that month of June. We will go and spend some time with T&E at their regularly scheduled meeting, and then we will most likely hold a land use meeting of our own. So we'll be busy in June. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. So with all that,
my thanks to the members of T&E who for being here tonight on somewhat short notice. Just wanted to add that in as well. Yeah,
much gratitude to our friends of T&E. So with all that being said, let's turn it to the applicants. If you want to introduce yourself, and then you can share your screen and walk us through your presentation.
Unmute us? Yep. Great. Thank you, Layla. Thank you, EJ. And thanks to all the committee members for coming together tonight. My colleague, Liz Lee, will be sharing the presentation. Liz, are you able to activate that? Do you have sharing privileges? Great. Fantastic. Okay. Just waiting for that to click in. All right, I'm Zach Bernstein with Fried Frank, Land Use Council to Boston Properties. I'm sitting here with Rich Monopoly and Jay Stewart of Boston Properties. This is a joint application of Boston Properties and the MTA to facilitate the redevelopment of the MTA's former headquarters property, 341 to 347 Madison Avenue, which we refer to as 343 Madison. The proposed project is a new office building with a prominent on-site entrance to the Long Island Railroad's new East Side Station. The project will also include 3 off-site transit improvements at the 42nd Street Grand Central Subway Station. The MTA, as the property owner, has selected Boston Properties to develop the site pursuant to a 99-year ground lease. Here today from the MTA is Bob Paley, the Director of Transit-Oriented Development, and Lisa Schreibman, the Senior Director of Strategic Planning at New York City Transit. In addition to Rich, I'm also joined by Doug Hocking of KPF Architects and Daniel Cohen from Stantec Engineering. All of us will be presenting different parts of this presentation. We also have representatives of our environmental consultant, VHB, and my colleague, Wesley O'Brien. So to start, I will ask Mr. Paley to give you some background on the MTA's goals for the project.
Great, thank you, Zach. Good evening, I'm Bob Paley, Director of Transit-Oriented Development at the MTA. So this has been a long time in planning, and we're very pleased to be here with you today. In 2015, MTA moved out of the Madison Avenue buildings and consolidated the staff at 2 Broadway. Following an RFP and competitive bidding process, the MTA board approved the selection of Boston Properties to redevelop the property under a 99-year ground lease. Under the transaction, Boston Properties will be paying MTA yearly rental payments under the ground lease, as well as full property taxes. As contemplated by the RFP, these payments will provide critical ongoing funds in support of MTA's capital budget. The project will provide a prominent entrance to the Long Island Railroad's new station on the east side, which we refer to as East Side Access. Additionally, the project will include 3 priority improvements within the 42nd Street subway station on the Flushing line, which we identified as critical needs during the East Midtown planning process. You'll hear the details of these transit improvements later in the presentation. I'm now pleased to introduce Richard Monopoly of Boston Properties.
Hello, thank you. My name is Richard Monopoly. I'm Senior Vice President of Development, and I oversee development for Boston Properties here in the New York region. A little bit about us. We are a publicly traded REIT with properties across the country. Our 5 major markets are New York, Boston, DC, San Francisco, and LA. We own 7 office buildings in Midtown Manhattan, 4 of which we developed from the ground up. And as shown here, 5 are located in Community District 5, and 2 are just over the border in Community District 6. Next slide. We have a track record of building and maintaining transit entrances within our Midtown properties. And shown here is 7 Times Square, which we built in 2004. And most of you are probably familiar with this subway entrance at 42nd Street, which we rehabilitated as part of this development and are responsible for maintaining. Next slide. This slide shows our buildings at 599 and 601 Lexington. And in the foreground, you can see the 51st Street station entrance to the 6 and E&M trains that straddles these 2 properties. Next slide. We recently completed upgrades to the subway entrance at 601 Lex as part of our overall public space improvements at this property, which were originally approved by our Community Board 6 and Department of City Planning in 2016. Next slide. We're excited to have the opportunity to work with the MTA on our next office building at 343 Madison. On the right of this slide, you can see a rendering of the new building, which you'll hear more about from KPF. And on the left, you can see the distinctive new entrance for the Long Island Railroad that the project will deliver. We feel this building will be an addition to East Midtown that we'll all be proud of. I'll now turn the presentation back over to Zach Bernstein, Boston Properties Land Use Council, who will outline the land use application.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Rich. On the left here is a map of the East Midtown subdistrict of the Special Midtown District, which many of you may be familiar with. Highlighted in orange is the 343 Madison site, which is located in a sub-area called the Vanderbilt Corridor, as Layla had referred to. It's a 5-block corridor with zoning rules that were established prior to the East Midtown District and apply a little differently. The One Vanderbilt project, which most of this team, with the exception of Boston Properties, worked on as well, was the first project to be approved under the Vanderbilt Corridor zoning. And so this project is pursuing the same types of approvals as One Vanderbilt sought. So in the new East Midtown District, which was more recently approved, bonuses for transit improvements are as of right and don't require a ULURP application such as this. But in the Vanderbilt Corridor, where One Vanderbilt is located, where 343 is located, transit bonuses are by special permit only through what's called the Public Realm Improvement Bonus. Under this bonus, again, similar to One Vanderbilt, we're seeking an increase from 15 FAR to 30 FAR. And all of the bonus here is for the provision of on-site and off-site improvements to transit infrastructure. In the case of One Vanderbilt, a portion of the bonus came from transfer from a landmark, which is also permitted under the Vanderbilt Corridor zoning. The application before you will facilitate a building totaling approximately 750,000 square feet of zoning floor area. The bonus would be generated through the creation of the new 45th Street entrance, leading to East Side access, together with the suite of circulation improvements to the 42nd Street subway station. You'll hear in more detail about those a bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The special permit also includes certain zoning waivers for street wall, retail continuity, heightened setback, building entrance with loading and curb cut regulations. These waivers are similar to those that were granted for One Vanderbilt and result in a better site plan and functional office building when you increase the size of the building beyond the 15 FAR that the zoning was set up to allow. These waivers were put in the text of the special permit to allow for the larger building to function. Doug Hocking of KPF will now walk through the building's design, after which Stantec and New York City Transit will provide the details of the transit improvements. Doug, next slide, please.
Thanks, Zach. You want to go to the next slide? I'm Doug Hocking, a principal at KPF. KPF was pleased to be selected as the architect for this project. I'd like to walk you briefly around the site for context. Here's the Madison Avenue frontage. The existing facility is actually comprised of 3 separate buildings, and the buildings' respective floor plates do not line up. Next slide. Along 44th Street, you can see the existing building on the left with the MTA's ventilation building for the Long Island Railroad Concourse in the middle, and on the right is the Yale Club. Next slide, please. Here's the 45th Street frontage. To the right is the development site. In the middle is a 3-story portion of the existing 347 Madison building, and to the left is 52 Vanderbilt. On the 52 Vanderbilt frontage, you can also see an existing entrance to the Roosevelt Passage into Grand Central Terminal. This will remain in place. Next slide, please. Site footprint is a relatively small site for an office development. At 25,000 square feet, it's a little more than half the size of one Vanderbilt sites. Within the footprint, the site planning is dictated in part by the vent building staying in place, as well as the new entrance down to Long Island Railroad, which must be at the 45th Street corner of the site. We are pushing the building back from Madison Avenue as required to create a 20-foot wide sidewalk. We are also widening the sidewalk on 45th Street just to a standard 15-foot width. The building lobby will be along Madison Avenue, and required loading docks will be along 44th Street. The remaining area dictated that our core with the elevators be at the eastern edge of the site is what is called the side-loaded core building. Next slide, please. Here is the resulting ground floor plan, again with the transit entrance along 45th Street, the lobby along Madison, and the remaining space along Madison and East 45th Street dedicated to retail. Next slide, please. The architecture of the building starts with looking at its function. Here's an illustration of our initial massing study showing a simple podium and tower with the elevator layered in. Next slide. We then began to think about how to articulate that massing while keeping the functional office building, paying attention to buildings' close proximity and within the Midtown area. Perhaps the most important move is the recess along the entirety of the northwest corner of the building, highlighting the new transit entrance as a distinctive element of the streetscape. Next slide. Moving up the building, we look for opportunities to break up the building through the creation of recesses, notches, and terraces. The design of the proposed building will also ensure that light and air will reach the surrounding streets and public spaces through the use of these terraces and recesses. Next slide, please. From a sustainability perspective, we have aimed to exceed the requirements of the 2020 New York City Energy Conservation Code, including by using energy efficient glazing, low flow fixtures, automatic lighting, and state-of-the-art heating and cooling. We're also designing with accessibility in mind, following best practices and universal design. In terms of wellness, our design components include maximizing fresh air circulation, access to outdoor spaces, attention to the space for social distancing in the lobby and other common areas, and touchless interfaces. Next slide, please. Team is very proud of the place this building will hold on the skyline. It fits in well with Midtown while also remaining unique. The building would be a distinctive addition to the Manhattan skyline. Next slide, please. And here you can see the building rendered looking to the southeast. Next slide, please. And here you can see the building rendered viewed from the west. Next slide. Moving down to the street level, here's the 44th Street frontage of the site. As I noted, we paid particular attention to the building's adjacency with the Yale Club. Conditions at the street level will remain the same, with the vent building staying in place. The new building will cantilever over the vent building, but will stop short of the Yale Club. We included a reveal here to sort of illustrate the decorative masonry coining at the southwest corner of the Yale Club, preserving that view from Madison Avenue. Within the building, there will be retail activation at the corner of Madison and 44th Street. Next slide. And finally, we are most proud of how the building design highlights the prominent U-Transit entrance at 45th and Madison. By recessing this corner of the building, we created a clear identifier of this important new entry point to Long Island Railroad and Grand Central Complex. Next slide. Bob will take you a bit more about the importance of these entrances.
Great, thank you, Doug. So MTA is gearing up to open the East Side Access Project, which will bring Long Island commuters directly to the east side of Manhattan for the first time. The concourse in the illustration is shown in cream color. It's approximately 50 feet below Vanderbilt Avenue. The blue rectangles that you see to the east are the Long Island Railroad platforms, which are approximately 160 feet below Park Avenue. There will be entrances both to the north and to the south of the project site. But as you can see from the track locations in blue, the southern end of the platforms, which are just to the south of 45th Street, align with the project site. And so the entrance within the project site is a really critical location, and it would not have been possible without the project that you see before you today. So Daniel Cohn from Stantec will walk you through the details of this on-site improvement.
Thank you, Bob. Zooming closer in on the east side access concourse level, we see the site in dark yellow. And as Bob noted, the site is directly adjacent to the escalators that connect down to the south end of the Long Island Railroad platforms. Next slide. If we look at a cross section of east side access, we can see the Long Island Railroad platforms, again highlighted in blue towards the right, deep below Park Avenue and the Metro North platforms. The site, again highlighted in dark yellow, provides a direct connection to the street from the platforms. So a passenger exiting the train would take an escalator ride up to the concourse level. And then as we move to the next slide, move up through the site to get directly out to 45th and Madison. Significant amount of engineering work has already gone into this design, as this entrance will require approximately 50 feet of bedrock excavation to reach and tie into the existing concourse structure. Next slide. This slide shows the street level of the project site, where we're providing this brand new entrance to Long Island Railroad East Side access at the corner of 45th Street and Madison Avenue, providing 3 new escalators, a 6-foot wide staircase, and an ADA elevator direct from street to the concourse level. These circulation elements together would have the capacity to serve approximately 10,000 passengers every hour. This cross-section shows the transit elements coming down from Madison Avenue to reach the concourse level. And then on the next slide, this is a view from the south showing the elevator run and the double height entry space, which is a significant and generous connection from the above grade pedestrian circulation network to the below grade network. Next slide. So this series of photos shows some of the work that has already been done in preparation for the connection to the east side access. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see the face of bedrock within the development site. This is what will be excavated out to tie the site into the concourse. The other 2 photos show the structural modifications that have already been made to the concourse, made possible by Boston Properties' close coordination with the MTA over the last few years. Next slide. So this is a recent photo. This photo is exciting for many of us, as it shows the new Long Island Railroad East Side access concourse under construction. The blue sheetrock in the back left-hand corner of the photo is where this project's new entrance will connect. And the next slide. And finally, again, this is the rendering of at the corner of Madison Avenue and 45th Street that shows the new ESA entrance at the street level. The ESA entrance's finishes are consistent with the rest of the ESA concourse and will be distinct from the building's lobby. Now I would like to turn the presentation over to Lisa Schreibman from the New York City Transit Authority to discuss the project's off-site improvements at the Flushing line at 42nd Street.
Thank you, Daniel. If we could go to the next slide. My job at New York City Transit is to help optimize the customer experience in stations. The improvements that will be completed as part of this project were selected because the Flushing line is one of the system's busiest, and as is Grand Central. In connection with the East Midtown planning process, we identified needed circulation improvements to the 42nd Street station of the Flushing 7 line. And these improvements were included in the priority investment list for East Midtown. On the screen now is a portion of the station that runs from 3rd Avenue on the right-hand side of the slide to Park Avenue on the left. The platform is 3 levels down from the street and a level below the 456 Lexington Avenue line. There are circulation issues related to customers going from the Lexington line to the Flushing line and from the street to the Flushing line. On the left side of the screen, you can see the illustrative pedestrian flows at the U stairs, then the new center core stairs, and a widened stair on the east side that we believe will help address these circulation problems. Next slide. On the top of the slide, you can see the existing pinch point for riders going up and down the stairs from the Lexington Avenue line. We're proposing to widen this stair and to add an additional passenger lane. We'll essentially be going from 2 sort of skinny passenger lanes to 3 lanes. This will improve the dwell time of trains on the northbound 456 platform and increase on-time performance. Next slide. Here's an image of the existing condition. Next slide. And here is a rendering showing the proposed condition. Next slide. Customers transferring from the Lexington line to the 7 line move along a corridor to one of 2 stairs that land in the center of the 7 line platform. We're proposing to add an additional stair further east, which will also lengthen this corridor. The addition of these significant improvements will reduce crowding on the 7 line platform, congestion, and travel time for customers. Next slide. So here's an image of the existing condition. Next slide. And here we see how that corridor gets lengthened to staircases that lead you down to the 7 line. Next slide. Moving all the way to the east of the 7 line platform is a stair that connects directly up to the street. Currently, there is a stair and then you make a right-hand turn and you get to a set of escalators. And the stair is narrower than both the platform and the escalators. We'll be widening it from 4 to 6 lanes, which will provide for improved passenger flow and better customer experience. Next slide. Here is an image of the existing condition. Next slide. And here is a rendering that shows the 6-lane condition that will result from expanding the staircase. Next slide. In total, you can see on this slide the 3 major off-site improvements proposed for the Flushing Line Grand Central Circulation Network. We're very pleased to see that these improvements are actually going to become a reality, and we believe this will improve the customer experience and address long-standing circulation issues at the station. I'd now like to turn the presentation back over to Zach.
Thank you, Lisa. Next slide, please. So this concludes our formal presentation. I hope it answered some of your questions from trying to flip through PDFs. The MTA and Boston Properties look forward to completing its work on this project together and discussing more with you. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. So we are going to just take all the questions from committee members, whether they are transportation related or more land use related. We can just mix and match. Use the raise hand function to indicate that you have questions.
Direct traffic.
And let's see. Let's start with Tristan. Tristan, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Layla, and thank you for that very thorough presentation. Regarding the ESA entrance, was there any thought to having more than what looked like 2 doors, 2 entrances, in order to better accommodate the projected passenger flow?
Sure. I think you're referring to the entrance doors onto Madison Avenue and whether it was possible to accommodate additional doors. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that was certainly thought about and discussed with MTA. The thought was with passenger flows, it was best to have a direct in and out rather than having cross flows from 2 sides of there. I think it was split as to whether it would be helpful or harmful to flows to have the extra door. So it was something that was thought about. There could be a possibility for an additional door, and that's something that could be explored further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next online is Dave Achilles. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question and one brief comment. With the Flushing line.
We're going to stick to 2 questions. We'll have plenty of opportunities.
Okay. With the question then, excuse me. With the question, I was concerned with the Flushing line improvements. What steps have been taken to make these ADA compliant?
Would you like?
Sure. This Grand Central Station is already an ADA compliant station with the exception of the shuttle line. And the shuttle is being made ADA accessible as we speak. So all of that accessibility will remain in place and will not be affected by these projects.
Thank you. Does that address your question, Dave? I'll take that for a yes. Next question from Matt. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation. My question, I had 2 questions. One is around circulation. You had mentioned that the new entrance will serve 10,000 people every hour. And can you share just what the current number of people that the current entrances serve, or do we know that?
Well, Eastside Access hasn't opened yet, so they're not serving any people at this time. This was identified, this isn't part of the original planning for Eastside Access, and was identified as a very critical point at the end of the platform. I'm sure, just from riding the subway or otherwise, people look for the nearest exit rather than wanting to traverse a long way north or south. And so this can accommodate up to 10,000 riders in an hour, but there are not current flows. Okay.
So maybe I'll ask it maybe a slightly different way. It sounds like sort of the trade-off is increase the circulation for sort of building the building is sort of the kind of fundamental trade-off. Is there any sense of what percentage that increases, or is it really just the ability to have a big entrance at all?
So can I respond to that? Currently, we project that about 16,000 customers will use it, although the capacity is for 10,000 an hour, but 16,000 a day. There was planning work initially looking at a location around 45th Street for an exit. It would have had to been in the street, and that was deemed to be, not an acceptable solution to close the street for an entrance. And so and all that planning work preceded the decision for MTA to leave the headquarters, consolidate downtown. And so when that decision was made, this opportunity presented itself, and it's really a strategic location that you want to have an exit.
Thanks so much, Robert.
Just as a quick follow-up for comparison, what would the other Eastside Access entrances accommodate in terms of flow of people per hour?
I don't have an answer to that. We could certainly find what the projections are, but I don't know the numbers at this point.
Okay. The entrance that is being contemplated that would be within the Rudin management building across from JP Morgan Chase. Is this entrance still in the maps and being developed?
Yeah, no, it's a location that we want to see developed. Absolutely. The project, Eastside Access, will open with sufficient exiting capacity, but for customer convenience, we want to have these additional access points, and it also helps to disperse customers. And it's just a better plan to have more access points.
Yeah, thank you. All right, next question goes to Mike Greeley. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Similar lines, will there be any additional new access to Grand Central Terminal from this Eastside Access entrance?
This entrance doesn't. This entrance can get you to Grand Central Terminal through the Long Island Railroad concourse. If you went all the way to the end of the concourse, you get to either the Biltmore Room or to the One Vanderbilt project, and then go, traverse back up. But this is a straight shot down to the 50 feet down to the East Side Access Concourse. It doesn't have a stop. It wasn't feasible to have a stop in between because the Grand Central mezzanine level, the Roosevelt Passage, are somewhere in between the East Side Access Concourse and street level.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, with the terraces, will there be any open public space with the terraces that are designed anywhere in the building? Because you mentioned one Vanderbilt being under the same regulations, and they provided a street plaza.
Yeah, and one Vanderbilt, the street plaza was one of the bonus improvements to get their total bonus of 15 FAR. Here, the bonusable improvements are purely within transit. So the terraces on this building are not generating any bonus. They're to provide access to outdoor space for the office tenants in the building.
Okay, thank you.
And just for everybody to understand, there's actually no requirement for open space in the Vanderbilt Corridor subdistrict, as opposed to the East Midtown, where there is a 10,000 square foot minimum requirement for open space. All right, next question goes to Aaron Ford. Go ahead.
Hi, welcome. Great presentation. So a couple clarifying questions. The proposal is basically doubling the density of what would be allowed under current zoning. Can you confirm what the total sort of square footage that's already built on this location, just in comparison to the numbers you have about what you could build and then what you're able to build with the bonus versus like what's actually on that site now? Yeah. And then, could you speak to what at full capacity, how many people are projected to sort of work in this new building at full capacity at the proposed zoning change capacity for density?
Sure. So the existing building is about 350,000 square feet. The as of right zoning floor area is 376,000 square feet at 15 FAR. And so under the Vanderbilt Corridor zoning, it's permitted to seek a bonus to double that. And so it's adding 376,000 feet, and the worker population is approximately 3,000 people. 3,300.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes to Renee Kinsella. Renee, go ahead.
Thank you, Leila. I'm just curious if you could speak to where the unused landmark development rights came from.
There are no landmark development rights being used to bonus this building. One Vanderbilt transferred landmark development rights from the Bowery Savings Bank building, but this project is not, this is an MTA sponsored project on their property. And so it was their public policy prerogative or goal to seek to make transit improvements to the greatest extent possible. So the project does not utilize any landmark development rights.
Thank you.
And once again, just for everyone, there's no requirement to use air rights. It's a possibility, but it is not a requirement. So you can reach the maximum 15 FAR bonus to reach a max 30 FAR for the building solely with bonus improvements, which are, they're deemed public realm, and they could be transit or they could be at grade open space. In that particular case, the applicant has chosen to go full on transit, and that's obviously in the DNA of MTA. All right, next question goes to George Kalis. George, go ahead.
George, you are
You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Many rail advocates from west of the Hudson have looked forward to having what's called Alternative G, a connection from Penn Station to Grand Central, which was studied in detail in the Major Investment Study ARC program. That, from the appearance of the drawings that I've seen so far, that connection would be would preclude the accommodation of the extension of access to the flushing line that you described. Is it possible to have continue to permit that kind of a connection, which is thought of as kind of the nation's most important single connection if everyone would agree to it? The question is, can the design be altered so it doesn't preclude the ARC Alternative G going out through Grand Central and continuing to Penn Station?
Bob, are you familiar with what George is referring to?
I'm not sure. I think there was a proposal with ARC, I guess, very, very early on before ARC was actually approved and completed, but unfortunately abandoned, to connect Penn Station to Grand Central. But that was abandoned many, many years ago, as far as I know. I don't know much beyond that. This was so many years ago.
I actually have a follow-up sort of like curiosity question in this line of questioning. If Eastside Access provides access to Grand Central from Long Island Railroad, and we know that currently Long Island Railroad feeds directly into Penn Station, is it fair to assume that there is a connection between Grand Central and Penn Station?
No.
Or is that a false equivalence?
No, these are two separate services. You make a choice at Jamaica to either go to Grand Central or you go to Penn Station. I mean, the connection between Penn and Grand Central will remain the subway. There's no commuter rail connection between the two.
Okay, so like if you want to take commuter rail, you would have to go back to Jamaica and then back into Penn Station.
Well, you would
it's not like one line that stops along the way and continues on.
Yeah, no, you would choose to go one way or the other at Jamaica. You wouldn't go back to Jamaica. I mean, if you wanted to go from Penn to Grand Central, you do exactly what you do today, which is to take the 7th Avenue and the shuttle.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Layla, I just have one follow up on that same line that might clarify for on this specific topic. Bob, I'm wondering if you can speak to the fact of whether any of the proposed changes that we're looking at tonight are perhaps like closing off a right of way that could have been used for a connection like that in the future.
No, these are all just entrances to the stations and improvements within the stations. There's nothing to do with the actual rights of way. So that would be a completely separate issue.
Okay. Yep. Just wanted to clarify that those were mutually exclusive. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is going to be from Joel Maxman. Joel, go ahead.
Thank you, Layla. So I think I understood that the sidewalk widening on the Madison Avenue side of the building is going to be accomplished by pushing the building back from the property line. So it's property is.
That's correct. Yeah, 7 feet back.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is that also the case on 45th Street? It looked like the plan looked like it was building out into the street bed, or is it also by property setback?
No, it is not by in order to keep the transit entrance as deep as was needed to make that connection with the escalators, et cetera. The building holds the property line the same way the current building does, but that is a narrower than usual New York City sidewalk. And so it's being pushed out, the curb is being pushed out to achieve a standard 15-foot sidewalk width.
So if that's the case, is there any reason why it won't be extended, the widened sidewalk won't be extended all the way to Vanderbilt? It looks like a pinch point.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's the lay-by loading area for the 52 Vanderbilt building. They load in through a side door on 45th Street. And so, that would involve coordination with them to be sure they still have their loading capabilities. So that's why the design as of right now extends it only in front of our building. But it's possible there could be conversations to be had with DOT and with 52 Vanderbilt to have a solution that goes further.
Thank you.
Thank you. EJ, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of ask, and this has been touched on by some questions already, but I was wondering if you had some top line numbers. And obviously the math gets a little bit complicated because you're projecting, you're kind of projecting usage of a Long Island Railroad station that doesn't exist yet, and then sort of layering on top of it the population, the worker population that'll be added as a result of this project as well, which you pegged at 3,300. I'm wondering if you have an estimate of how many individuals from the building itself versus the surrounding area will be accessing the entrance, the primary entrance that you showed to us, and kind of how those numbers break down.
Yeah, I mean, high level
your estimations.
Yeah, high level. I mean, I'm going to defer to Bob and potentially the environmental team, but high level, the purpose of this entrance and the flushing improvements are not to accommodate the increased flows of people from this building. While 3,000 people is a lot of people in the realm of Midtown generally, it's not, and the trips are fairly dispersed. And so, these trips are not breaking the system. MTA identified in its planning processes, with respect to the flushing line, they identified the needs there as part of the East Midtown zoning planning process, and before that as needs for the district at large. They didn't, see this project coming and want to address the flushing line because of this project. Likewise for East Side Access, it's a system need that is much broader. But Bob, do you want to? I think you spoke a little bit to the volumes that East Side Access is expected to accommodate.
Sorry, the projections are for a typical day there would be 160,000 customers. But that's of course throughout the day. So I don't have numbers broken down beyond that, but I guess by comparison, you can see that those are fairly large numbers in comparison with a specific building, because it is intended to be a major transit facility for the entire Midtown area.
And this specific entrance is anticipated, you said earlier, 10,000 an hour was?
Its capacity is 10,000 an hour, but our expectation is it wouldn't be anywhere near that. It would be 16,000 per day. So it has plenty of capacity and, opportunity, if there's growth in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to Clayton. Clayton, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you for I applaud you for a presentation that really cut through a lot of the density and potentially confusing elements of this in a way that was very clear. So I appreciate that a lot. My question is about the shadow impacts of the proposed building. In 2014, Community Board 5 did vote unanimously to deny support of the text amendment for the Vanderbilt Corridor on the grounds that a 30 FAR was not defensible anywhere other than along 42nd Street. And one of the main reasons, and that resolution is, I'll just, in case anyone wants to remember, there it is. There were many reasons for that, but one of them was the DEIS for the text amendment revealed shadow impacts on historic resources in the neighborhood, and on Bryant Park and on the New York Public Library. So I wanted to ask if you have done a shadow study, if we have renderings of that, and if we have more information about the impact of the proposed building.
Yes, thank you, Clayton. We have done a shadow study as part of the DEIS for this project. I guess that's one benefit to the community board of the Vanderbilt Corridor not having as of right development. Each project has to go through this discretionary process for the specific building. And so our DEIS studied the actual potential shadow impacts of this building, and there were no significant adverse impacts on any resources. The detail, and it was studied very extensively. The details of that are in the DEIS, which is published, was already published. We can walk through in excruciating granular detail if you'd like, but we did study the potential for impacts on any historic resources or open spaces, and there were no impacts found.
Including in Bryant Park?
Including on Bryant Park, yeah. I mean, there are small shadows cast on various places, like small sliver shadows for very short periods of time. So in Bryant Park, for example, those very small sliver shadows at the time of year that they fall the most, one of them is before the park opens, is in the 6 o'clock a.m. hour before the park opens. The other one goes away within the 7 o'clock hour, and neither of them have an impact on planting under the criteria or on users. They're very minimal.
Thank you.
On the same note, have you also done a sky exposure plane analysis?
Well, the East Midtown zoning isn't a sky exposure plane analysis per se, but yeah, I think you're referring to the daylight evaluation. And that's one of the waivers that is available under the East Midtown text, similar to one Vanderbilt, but we did, I don't have it in this deck, but we did a daylight evaluation study comparing the as of right building or the existing buildings with the proposed building. And it's a very marginal difference, because the existing building or any as of right building, the combination of the high street walls of existing or as of right building, as well as the surrounding context, as you step back and raise this tower up, the incremental impact is minimal.
Do you actually have the conclusions of this study?
I have a graphic on this. I'm sorry, I don't have it in this set. It is something we could potentially follow up with.
Great. Is it a Waldron diagram?
Well, there is a Waldron diagram in the ULURP application set, but Waldron diagram is difficult to draw immediate conclusions from looking at it on a screen or a piece of paper. But yes, there are daylight evaluation studies were done as required under the zoning for the project, and they're in the file also.
Okay, but you are still seeking a waiver because you're not reaching you're going over.
Yeah, because the rules are set up for a 15 FAR building. So what happened in East Midtown under the text that followed the Vanderbilt Corridor, the East Midtown text actually changed the daylight evaluation rules to account for larger buildings that were now allowed under East Midtown. So the baseline rules for Waldron diagrams are set up for a smaller building, and so once you start to get taller, you impinge on the framework that was set up for 15 FAR buildings. You can't really build a building higher than 15 FAR under those rules. As I said, East Midtown changed those rules to allow the as of right East Midtown buildings to account for that, but the 5 sites in the Vanderbilt Corridor were left to ask for those changes rather than getting them, from the get-go.
Yeah, just for the record and for everybody's edification, this is one of the main reasons that we objected to the East Midtown rezoning. We felt that the daylight evaluation was actually not acceptable, and that our sidewalks would be deprived of daylight exposure, and that was a problem. So we like Vanderbilt Corridor better for that. All right, moving on. Julie has her hand up. Julie, go ahead.
This question may be more directed to MTA. I'm wondering about the station improvements at 42nd Street, and if the public bathroom there
is slated for renovation. And part of the reason I'm asking this with this application is that Boston Properties provided 4 toilet stalls and full-time attendants at the 7 Times Square building when they were negotiating with MTA back in the 90s. And I believe they pay Times Square Lines $100,000 a year for the full-time attendants. It's a very successful bathroom model because it's extra safe with the attendants. And I'm wondering if MTA would consider that for this station on the east side of Midtown.
Bob, do you want to take that? I know there are a lot of new bathrooms planned in the Grand Central Complex, but you probably know.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar with the current policy with respect to bathrooms and what would be provided. Certainly they're in Grand Central. I will just make a comment since I'm familiar with the historical deal that was referred to, which was a very significant give on the part of Boston Properties to build that building because they were allowed to use more of the streetscape, and in exchange that this condition was imposed on them. But it wasn't a bonus situation. It was a completely different scenario. I mean, what we're seeking here out of this development are the improvements that you saw, which are very significant improvements.
Hey, Bob, it's Helene Sinclair. I just want to add that One Vanderbilt does have a public bathroom, and that was part of the public improvements, which actually is accessible off of 42nd Street. And also the East Side Access entrance being built as part of this Boston Properties development. Actually, where it lands at the bottom of the concourse level of East Side Access, it's happens to be adjacent to the bank of bathrooms on the East Side Access concourse level.
Thanks, Helene.
If that helps at all. It's not exactly the right answer, but there are bathrooms.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if Lisa would be able to advise, because the last time I visited the Times Square subway station, the bathrooms were closed for repair. That was in 2019.
So all the bathrooms in the system have been closed for the pandemic. I'm not sure when we will be reopening them post-pandemic. Again, I don't think that sort of fully answers that question. In terms of, additional space at Grand Central, it's just, within the subway, within the paid zone, there isn't a lot of space to work with.
Right, but I do believe you guys have existing bathroom infrastructure in that station.
Yeah.
So,
right, there's a bathroom that we expect to be reopening at that station when we reopen all the bathrooms.
And is that area going to be renovated along with some of the circulation improvements?
So no, that is not one of the projects that is happening with the 343 project.
Okay, just a follow up, the planned bathroom that will be part of East Side Access, will they be attended?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about, the ones at the bottom on the concourse level?
Yes.
I have to say, I don't really know the answer to that. We could get back to you with the information.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right, moving along, the next question goes to Mike, really. Mike, go ahead.
A question about the 4, 5, 6 staircases that'll be going down to the 7 train corridor to connect. What is the difference between what is there now and what will the proposed width of the proposed staircase be, and how many people can that staircase, the existing staircase, can accommodate now versus how much the proposed staircase can accommodate?
So there are sort of 2 related improvements. There will be an extension of the corridor and 2 new stairs that will land on the 7-line platform. And those will sit between what is sort of the center of the platform where the existing stairs land and the 3rd Avenue end of the platform. And the idea there is that we will bring additional customers up from either the front or the back of the train, depending whether you're heading west or heading east, without having to walk half the platform to get there. So in terms of, for instance, level of service, what we project will happen in 2026 is that, oh, thanks. We project that, so we have a staircase here, and we have these 2 staircases that are coming off of the platform currently, and they're like 2 sets of splayed staircases. Currently, our projections are that in 2026, those will have a level of service of C and E. And by building the yellow and those additional stairs and that additional corridor, we'll get those the existing staircases down to levels of service B and D. It just adds a way to get people off the platform and into this corridor. Then up at, we're widening a staircase. So if we go back, I think 2 slides, maybe more. We're going to be widening a staircase. There we go. Excellent. Off of the northbound 456 platform. So effectively going from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. And that's going to bring us from a level of service D to a level of service C.
How many inches wider is that new staircase going to be on the Lexington Avenue?
Sure. So let me look that up.
It's 1'3", it's 15 inches.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question goes to George again. Hi, Keyless. George, go ahead. Make sure you unmute yourself. George, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself. George, I don't know if you have a question. You have your hand up. Okay, we can go. We can get back to George.
All right.
Here he is.
George, you're with us?
Yeah. I just wanted to point out that I don't think Bob completely answered my question about, because the ARC project, the Hudson River Tunnel project, is very much active. There has not been a final report, and one of the obvious alternatives is to connect to East Midtown, which would be a great benefit to the development in this corridor, because it would provide access to the suburban workforce west of the Hudson, which is half of the total workforce in this region. So that there could be alternative ways to accommodate. That question was really to accommodate the Flushing line access without having to preclude the plan that was developed by Parsons Brinkerhoff and was quite well received by Community Board 5 when it made a plan that would be quite useful for this community. And therefore, I think it should be part of this discussion, not precluded.
This project, Bob, just about this project is expanding circulation and stair access on at the 42nd Street station of the Flushing line, and doesn't do anything to the rail of the Flushing line. It's addressing platform crowding issues at that station. Is there something about the connectivity that connectivity you're speaking to that you think is related to this project or these improvements?
Certainly is. It would be, if you can connect Penn Station to Grand Central, you have a different pedestrian flow occurring at this location. And that there are plenty of ways to provide that expansion that you were talking about without precluding the connection between Penn Station and Grand Central. You could relocate it, slide it to the west, or slide it to the east, or raise it up a little bit. It makes no sense to block this connection that the Community Board 5 strongly supported when it was presented.
Actually, let me try to
Take a look at alternatives.
question. I'm going to try to ask the question maybe slightly differently, or at least to clarify something for me. Maybe I'm the only one, but maybe others share my confusion. Does your project preclude the construction of a tunnel between Penn Station and Grand Central?
This project has nothing to do with where an alignment would run. I mean, this just has to do with exiting an entrance and improvements on existing concourse. So it has nothing to do with the rights of way. That would have to be a separate study. This doesn't preclude anything. It merely increases capacity for existing and planned improvements.
Okay, George, does that address your question? Because basically the scope of what is in front of us really does not discuss creating a tunnel between Penn and Grand Central. That would be, a major capital improvement that would probably get the state and possibly the feds and possibly New Jersey Transit involved. I don't know, and it's not really within the scope of what we're discussing tonight. So it's not really germane to this application, if that makes sense.
Well, I think normally in a complicated situation like this, we're adding enormous amount of floor space in a very dense area. You would want to consider relevant options to make the project, make the whole area work better. New Jersey Transit hasn't completed their Hudson Tunnel project. And one of the options for that Hudson Tunnel is to connect to Grand Central. And while you could build this passageway, then you can interrupt the passageway when New Jersey Transit and MTA agreed to make this connection. That just wastes time and money, and this would be the time to plan ahead. That's what's called comprehensive planning.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. It's just that it's not germane to this particular application.
Layla, if you don't mind, I think I can help with this possibly. George, I think what you're referring to is a plan to extend that tunnel up Park Avenue. It would get to Grand Central, and that was contemplated in the early 2000s. And that would come up Park Avenue at the same depth as the East Side access tunnels, which is about 160 feet below grade. So to summarize, this project, none of the entrances that we're proposing would preclude that. And in fact, would help with any additional demand if that came to pass.
Well, I would like to discuss this with Robert and others, because I think you're mistaken. It doesn't preclude it. You can always tear something out after you and provide this flushing access. But if you knew it was going to be a connection south from Grand Central coming 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you would design this connection so that it would allow for that station connection between the two stations.
Okay, so George, you're slipping into comments period. We'll have plenty of opportunity for comments. I think it's fair more than ever to say that I think we're going to exercise our 60-day prerogative to review this complicated and complex and important proposal. So I suggest that you hold all those good comments and good thoughts for the comment period, so that we can continue to move this process along. I don't see any more hands up from members of the committee, but I have a whole slew of questions. But before I start shooting them, I want to make sure that my colleagues of the land use or the transportation committees have wrapped up. Julie, you have a follow-up question. Julie, go ahead.
Sorry, that was an accident, but I did want to ask about finishes at the 7 train platform. In the rendering, it just shows updated finishes at the select areas, but in between the spaces, would MTA consider just refinishing so that it's continuous and the station looks updated in totality?
Lisa?
So the corridor is, in white subway tile currently, and I think the renderings sort of show an extension of that white subway tile because the corridor and the staircase get extended. There is no provision under this project to do additional finish work at the 7-line platform.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Any more questions from members of the committees? Okay, so I'm going to start with my questions. The first one is, can you actually elaborate a little bit on the ownership? I'm a little confused. So the building used to be owned by MTA, and it is now still owned by MTA, but it is leased for 99 years to Boston Properties?
No, it is not yet leased. MTA owns the building. We won't actually enter into a lease until the completion of ULURP, and then that would be a 99-year lease.
Okay. And there was some reporting over the years that there was a contention on taxes between the city and MTA. Can you actually touch on that, and what was okay, let me actually ask a very specific question. Is the building exempt from real estate property taxes under a pilot program?
Well, MTA as a state agency is not technically subject to taxes, real estate taxes, but we are imposing the payment of the equivalent of taxes called pilot, as you properly referred to, on the developer. And those would be used along with the ground rent to raise money in the capital markets that would, first of all, pay for the offsite improvements, but also go into MTA's capital program. We've been very cognizant over the years of using our assets most effectively so that we can continue to raise additional sums so it doesn't come from tax sources themselves. And so the ground rent payment, et cetera, would go directly into the capital program.
And who is going to determine the assessment of the pilot?
The city, it would be the standard city assessment process, so that it would be the equivalent of what taxes would normally be.
And what city agency is going to be in charge of it?
I actually am not familiar with how the city actually assesses their property. It's the Department of Finance. I don't know if somebody.
Yeah, it's the Department of Finance through the regular system of assessment that's used for any other, ULURP or not, MTA or not, any property in Midtown.
I was under the impression that it was actually ESD who had authority to enter into pilots. It's either EDC. I'm sorry, EDC. The Economic Development Corporation of New York City.
Well, other agencies have that power. Yeah, other economic development agencies that have the power to enter into pilot arrangements as well. I mean, but we don't our purpose is for transportation. So the purpose is to use the money for transportation investment.
Okay. And it's going to be a pilot agreement for how many years?
It would be for 99 years. I mean, it would run concurrently with the ground lease.
Okay. And it's only for pilot. Would it be any other taxes? Would it be also for the cost of development?
Well, there's a provision called payment in lieu of sales tax on construction materials, and that would also be a similar situation.
With a pilot and a pilot.
Yes.
For 99 years. Okay. And I'm not lamenting about it, but if it's state-owned, why is it a ULURP and not a GPP? I'm not lamenting, trust me.
It was an arrangement we made with the city to follow the ULURP procedure, where you're absolutely correct. It is actually a voluntary arrangement. MTA is not normally subject to the city zoning and ULURP, but it's our preference to do that since we're viewing this as a conventional development project. We're not looking for any unusual procedures with that.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for bringing some context around that. I have one specific question about the massing of the property. Can you speak to the cantilever over the vent building? I'm not sure am I referring to it properly, but the cantilever portion that then abuts the Yale Club.
Yeah, Liz, do you want to go back to that rendering from the deck, which was on page 25? Yeah, there you are. Yeah. And Doug can speak to this further, but is
there any way you can zoom in so that we can and put your cursor so that people can see what we're referring to? Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and so in order to get, this is a fairly constrained site to begin with. As I said, it's a little more than half the size of One Vanderbilt, and then has this part of the site that has ventilation for east side access. And so in order to get floor plates that are more functional in the building, where normally your whole building would occupy the site, we can only extend to the full footprint when we get more than 36 feet above the vent building. But that's, as Doug spoke to, and he can speak to it more if you'd like, when we get to that point, the building's actually pulled back from the corner of the Yale Club. The decorative facade of the Yale Club wraps the corner a small amount. You can see the decorative coining. And then beyond that, it's just a party wall. It's a sort of standard red brick or multicolored brick party wall that was intended to have a building up against it. But we have included a little reveal in the design so that when you're walking toward the building on the street or along 45th Street, you still see that decorative brickwork turn the corner.
And how are you going to maintain this hollow area?
Doug, maybe you can speak to this more, but when we've spoken about it, there is that's a very small area, and that's, I think, Doug, you can probably speak to the exact dimension of the offset, but then beyond that, it's a standard party wall situation with a seismic separation, but weather sealed off all around the side of the wall, so there's no need to access it. It's like any other party wall situation once you get beyond this corner area.
But for example, in winter, snow removal or accumulation of ice from the cantilevered portion, which is something that we've suffered tremendously on 57th Street with the super tall towers. They're shedding ice and about to kill someone every other snow day in the city, and they make the sidewalks impractical. Do you have a plan in place for that?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't think that question is particular to the cantilever. That's an overall question on building design, I think. I don't know if KPF or Boston Properties can speak to that.
And KPF certainly.
I can talk to it. This is Andrew Cleary from KPF. I'm the technical director. And I would. You're exactly right, Zach. It's not relevant specifically to the cantilever area, but for every building we design, every high-rise building in particular, we do a snow and ice analysis to just check to see if any of the profiles or the configurations that we're developing as part of the curtain wall panels or the larger massing is prone to attract any snow and ice buildup. And so we design around it. Obviously, we don't want to be party to something that would attract accumulation like you're talking about. And there are kind of rules of thumb and things that you stay away with. We don't think there's anything, we haven't done that analysis yet because we're in still the early days, but we don't think there's anything that we've designed yet that would that would be prone to that. When we do the analysis, and if we do find there is anything, obviously we'll address it to make sure it doesn't create the hardships you talked about.
Okay, thank you. I see, so that wraps up for me. I see that Mike has his hand up with another question. Mike, go ahead. You're on mute, Mike.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, with these 7-line platform, will there be any improvement to the air conditioning on the platform? Because it's very hot there in the summertime. And they have some exhaust vents that sometimes work and sometimes don't. I just want to know if there was any improvement planned for that.
Right. This program of projects does not include updating the air temping system or those large exhaust fans.
Okay, thank you. All right, last chance for members of the committee to ask questions. I don't see any hands up. I will open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public, you can use the raise hand function if you wish to speak, and then you will be allowed to talk, and you can make your comments and ask your questions. And the applicant will have an opportunity to address them. So we will start with Anne Seligman. Anne Seligman, you're going to be given permission to speak, and you can unmute yourself. If you can introduce yourself and any affiliation that you may have, and ask your question or make your comment.
So I am a member of Community Board 6, and I am here as an individual. Of course, when we go other places, if we are not explicitly representing another community board, we are as individuals. But I know this is an issue, that affects both of our boards. And I just want to say, it was a very interesting presentation. I hope that when the presenters come to CB6, you will be incorporating answers to the very excellent questions that the CB5 members have already asked. So thanks very much. And I just want to say I look forward to working with you guys on, making this project the best it can be. But you guys have asked some great questions, and I look forward to hearing the answers to them when we ask them too.
Thank you so much, Anne. So yeah, for all the members of CB5, this project also falls into CB6, and its great proximity also makes CB6 a major stakeholder. So the applicants will present to CB6 sometime later this month. And
I would just quickly speak to that. We'll be presenting to the Land Use Committee on May 24th, Monday, May 24th.
Yeah, excellent. And both community boards will, probably issue a set of recommendations that will be either joint or certainly very similar. So we look forward to working with our friends from CB6. Next person to speak will be Ryan Pukos. Ryan, you're permitted to talk.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, excellent. My name is Ryan Pukos. I am a senior project manager with the Grand Central Partnership, and I am going to read a brief statement on behalf of our organization. The Grand Central Partnership is a business improvement district serving an approximately 70 square block area in Midtown East surrounding Grand Central Terminal. As one of the world's largest bids, serving a district with 73 million square feet of commercial, residential, and retail building space, our goal is to keep our Midtown East neighborhood clean, safe, and thriving. We believe that the redevelopment of 343 Madison supports this goal in several important ways. First, the redevelopment will unlock privately generated revenue that can be used to make transit upgrades to enhance connectivity and safety in the district. Specifically, the project will enable a new state-of-the-art transit entrance on Madison Avenue with direct connection to Grand Central Terminal and the new Long Island Railroad Terminal. It will also generate funding for improvements to the 7-line platform and the Grand Central 42nd Street subway station. Second, 343 Madison addresses a long-term challenge for our district by replacing aging commercial infrastructure with a modern, efficient, and sustainable Class A office building, which was one of the most critical goals of the 2017 Greater East Midtown rezoning. The new building will help attract and retain world-class talent and businesses that seek new construction and flexible office space. Finally, 343 Madison represents a critical investment in the economic health of Midtown East and the city at large. In the short term, this investment will support the city's economic recovery by creating thousands of well-paying jobs and bringing more workers to the district to support our restaurants, retailers, and other businesses. In the long term, it will boost tax revenue and help ensure that Midtown East remains a premier central business district and vibrant destination for New Yorkers and visitors alike. For these reasons, we support the redevelopment of 343 Madison Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person will be Joseph Fruer. Joseph, you're going to be allowed to speak, and you can ask your question or make a comment.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Layla. I'm Joseph Fruer. I'm a board member with CB5, although not on one of these two committees. My question is just about the payments in lieu of taxes. Someone, I forgot who, mentioned that some of the improvement of the flow of pedestrians between the 7 line and the 456 line, some of those transit improvements are going to come out of the pilot payments. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. So I guess my question is, are those transit improvements on top of the pilot payments for the 99-year lease, or are they going to be taken out of those pilot payments?
So we're actually not distinguishing between the pilot and the ground rent. It's all one sort of source of funds. But we do have to finance the MTA will be constructing the offsite improvements. So we're going to use the source of funds will be from the development of this project. So it will come out of generally the project revenues.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Next question will be from Santos Rodriguez. Santos, you're going to be permitted to speak, and you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Santos Rodriguez. I'm here to testify on behalf of Gary LaBarbera, President of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York and vicinity. On September of 2020, the Building and Construction Trades Council testified in support of this project, and we continue to support the 343 Avenue project today. The Building and Construction Trades Council is an organization of local building and construction trades unions that are affiliated with 15 international unions and the North American Building Trades Unions. Our local unions affiliated represent approximately over 100,000 union construction workers. The building trades mission is to raise the standard of living for all workers, to advocate for safe work conditions, and to collectively advance working conditions for our affiliates members, as well as workers in New York City. Boston Property is developing 343 Madison. This project would comprise of 925,000 square feet and rise 1,050 feet tall. With Class A office space above ground floor retail, this project will also upgrade and improve access to various transportation facilities, including the East Side Access, the New York City 7 line, and the 4, 5, and 6 line. These upgrades to our city's transportation infrastructure will assist commuters navigating through Midtown Manhattan, as well as increase tax revenue to MTA city and state. The building itself will be a state-of-the-art building in the heart of Midtown that will employ energy-efficient glazing, utilize rooftops, solar panels, energy-efficient lighting, programmable thermostats, water-conserving features, and other sustainable designs and technology. Perhaps more importantly, this project is a significant investment in Midtown Manhattan that sends a strong message that New York City will recover from recover and rebound from the pandemic. It is an opportunity to welcome people back to the office and revitalize the Midtown neighborhood and surrounding businesses. Additionally, 343 Madison represents an opportunity to create hundreds, if not thousands, of new union construction jobs that will support middle-class lifestyles, providing area standard wages and benefits to support workers and their families. The project will provide important stability in the years to come, as construction will span several years, providing jobs, opportunity throughout demolition, construction, and post-construction jobs. It is a great opportunity to both bring people back to work and create additional jobs. The Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York and vicinity supports 343 Madison, as it will improve the lives of many New Yorkers, modernize our city, and create middle-class jobs for our members in the process. We thank you again for the opportunity to testify and support in this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person to speak will be Jessica Walker. Jessica, you're going to be permitted to talk. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Walker. I am the president and CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. We represent and support the 100,000 businesses across the borough of Manhattan. And as you can imagine, our biggest priority right now is the city's economic recovery in the wake of the COVID crisis. We are very grateful, as I'm sure all of you are, that the vaccine rollout is going so well. And also that Mayor de Blasio recently set a date for the city to fully reopen. Both of these things are leading to increased economic activity, but the long road to recovery continues. And you probably have seen that economists actually predict that New York City may not return to its pre-pandemic employment levels until the end of 2023, maybe even into 2024. So, and a lot of this, as you know, has been caused because the pandemic discouraged tourists and remote workers from being in the city. Quality of life concerns have been a hindrance to their coming back. So our job now is to do everything we can to strengthen the city's immense assets, improve our quality of life, and remind tourists and remote workers why New York remains the best city in the world. Upgrades to bustling commercial centers like East Midtown play a key role in accelerating our recovery, and we just cannot be content with the status quo. I just want to thank all of the members of the community board, because I know you guys have worked so hard on so many developments over the years since the rezoning. So just want to give you a little shout out there. Listen, we support this project because the plans for this new Class A state-of-the-art office tower is going to continue the legacy of bringing global companies and talented, the talented workforces that they have. And it's going to show that East Midtown is the place where employees will want to be located. New office tenants and increased foot traffic will directly contribute and support our members, our members, which are mostly small businesses, including restaurants, retail shops, and florists, and that will further help to accelerate the city's recovery. We're also extremely excited about the future transit improvements that we saw tonight for Grand Central Terminal and the surrounding area. All of the things that we saw tonight go a long way toward making the daily commute a more positive experience, and again, is a big attraction and a big help to try to bring some of those remote workers back to Midtown. It's for these reasons that the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce strongly supports the redevelopment of 343 Madison Avenue, which offers a direct investment in the long-term health, financial stability, and quality of life for one of Manhattan's most important central business districts. It's a project that can contribute to the city's comeback. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. Next person to speak will be Felicia Park-Rogers. Felicia, you're going to be unmuted and permitted to talk. You can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hello. Well, I brushed my hair and put on a jacket for tonight's meeting, but I guess you just have voice only.
You look fabulous.
Hello, and thank you for your time. My name is Felicia Park-Rogers, and I'm the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, which is an organization that fights for safe, fast, and fair transportation options that reduce car dependence in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And I'm here today as a transit advocate to express our support for the 343 Madison Avenue project to redevelop the MTA's vacant former headquarters near Grand Central Terminal. Among multiple benefits, this project will help jumpstart New York's economic recovery, as we were just hearing about, from COVID-19, which is not just good generally for New York City, but is good for New York City's transit. This is a key business and transit hub, and indeed it is hard to find a more transit-rich development spot in the 5 boroughs than this particular spot. As one of the transit advocacy groups that spent the last year successfully advocating for more than $15 billion in emergency funds to save our precious transit system, we are especially pleased that this project will unlock critical revenue to support the MTA's much-starved capital plan and to fund badly needed public realm and transit improvements into the future. That said, our support primarily stems from the Long Island Railroad rail station entrance and enhanced subway station circulation, as well as the accessibility improvements that the proposed development brings. Our review of the project leads us to conclude that it is designed in such a way as to honor both the historic place of East, Midtown, and Grand Central, as well as responding to the needs of the modern transit user while addressing sustainability concerns. Before the pandemic, overcrowding of Midtown transit hubs was a major issue, including along the 7 line. And this is expected to continue to be a problem when restrictions are fully lifted and workers begin to return to Midtown businesses, as well as tourists. This project will reduce pedestrian congestion above and below ground, as well as improve both wayfinding and circulation space. The sidewalks in this area are notoriously congested, and the sidewalk widening will greatly enhance mobility and safety for transit users. This project also expands the passenger flow and capacity of the 42nd Street subway station while providing really vital connectivity to the soon-to-be completed East Side Access terminal tracks. The transit improvements include multiple improvements to enhance pedestrian flow at the 42nd Street station for the aging subway line, as well as a new southern entry and exit point for the LIR East Side Access. As Manhattan reopens for business this year, it's crucial that we move ahead with this project to provide a better, more efficient, and safer commuting experience. This investment in transportation infrastructure will not only encourage use of public transit as one of the city's largest transit hubs, it will demonstrate that urban development projects can be successfully completed, recognizing the availability of public transit, developing densely to take advantage of existing infrastructure, and contributing to the community by improving transit infrastructure. If we fail to transform, let me say this too. More broadly, Tri-State encourages dense development near transit hubs like this one. The Department of City Planning projects that New York City's population will grow to 9.1 million by 2030. This estimate was made before COVID, but even if that number is not reached until 2040, planning now for the future just makes sense. With our city's population on the rise, we would need to encourage people to live and to work near transit to reduce road congestion and related emissions. Because of all these reasons and more, we feel this project is a good example of both encouraging mass transit, reducing dependence on cars, and supporting transit development dense business areas. So thank you very much for your time, and we do support this project.
Thank you. Next person to speak will be Dev Gandhi.
Thank you, Layla and EJ, and both committees, and to the community board. My name is Dave Gandhi. I'm here to represent the Yale Club of New York. I was the president of the Yale Club until 2017, and I was last before this committee a few years prior to that to discuss the committee's great work around our shared home on the Vanderbilt Avenue corridor. I'll be giving a statement on behalf of our nonprofit, and I'm fortunate to be joined tonight by Kevin Lichten, the vice president of our club, who'll be making a few comments after me, hopefully, and Amber Reed, who runs our operation as our general manager. There are many other members on this call tonight, and I'll be reporting back on this meeting back to our entire membership, but out of respect for the board's time, Yale Club's only sending 2 delegates to speak tonight, even though many of our community asked to be represented tonight. 50 Vanderbilt Avenue has been home to us for a little more than 100 years. I think that makes our building the longest standing member of the original terminal city design around Grand Central Terminal. And it's still functioning operational, and other than the wonderful terminal itself, I think that makes us the oldest. But our community is not just a building on Vanderbilt Avenue, nor is it just the 9,000 plus members and their families who use the building at 50 Vanderbilt Avenue, nor the tens of thousands of guests we welcome to our building in our neighborhood every year. It's also approximately the 300 unionized employees, mostly hotel and restaurant workers, but also painters, engineers, and all of them citizens, voters of this diverse city, and their families whose livelihoods are dependent upon the healthy operation of that building on 50 Vanderbilt Avenue. It's the retail operation at our street level and the jobs sustained in that operation by a vibrant street life along 44th Street and Vanderbilt Avenue, and the vibrancy of our broader community in Midtown East. That's why we're here tonight. We've been neighbors in CB5 for a long time, through generations of change in our city and in our neighborhood. We've been witness to and participants in extraordinary developments in our neighborhood over that span, including one now just 1 block to our south. We deeply acknowledge the need to update our urban infrastructure, the significance of the extraordinary transit improvements contemplated in this plan, and the access to our neighborhood they all facilitate. And we would promote some of these endeavors, but we must do so in a way that promotes the return to health of our community and kindles the future vibrancy of our Midtown East home. As your long-term neighbors, we feel we must use our voices in this forum tonight, given a plan that is extraordinary in its scope and the speed with which it has been presented. We feel it is quite rushed, without the time or understanding to contemplate the ramifications such a project might have on our broader community and the constituents we all hold dear. I'm here simply to ask this committee and CB5 more broadly to allow some time before making big decisions. We are one of the largest stakeholders on this block, along with our friends and neighbors at 52 Vanderbilt, and we've had a great long-term relationship with Bob Paley and the MTA over the years. We certainly understand what's at stake here, but we cannot be asked, and we are not ready to support or oppose this project yet, simply because we have not been afforded the time to analyze the information that we have, nor have we had open dialogue with Boston Properties as our potential neighbors as yet. I am incredibly impressed in this committee's ability to parse through the density of the PDFs and issues presented. But as I just observed the presentation given by Boston Properties, the pace of change alone made it challenging to understand and ascertain the effects of these often beautiful design elements. We have to date not discussed the plan at 343 Madison with Boston Properties directly, nor what remediation efforts will be undertaken to alleviate the somewhat extraordinary burden that will be placed on our building or on any of us as neighbors. The shadow diagrams were noted tonight. We have an open air rooftop on the 22nd floor that sustains the jobs of more than 100 unionized employees. Yet no analysis of the shadow diagrams has been able to be completed by us, given the timing of this information's transmission. A snow and ice analysis was mentioned. We have not seen it, nor do we know of it. We will obviously face multiple burdens and challenges during the proposed demolition and construction period, notwithstanding the challenges and burdens we will face over the longer term. The committee should take time to consider these ramifications, 30 days being well within the time parameters articulated earlier tonight, to allow for the participants and neighbors on our block to simply meet with Boston Properties and perhaps our elected representatives, such as our city council, Mr. Powers, or our borough president, Ms. Brewer, and hear what BP has in mind for the long-standing members of our street and our community. This proposed project should harmonize with its community. Our streets have been barren recently. Our corridors empty, deprived of their life and vibrancy by COVID and its effects. We must keep in mind that we have to allow our existing community to return to work, to return to life, and yes, to return home without an additional challenge that might impair its return to health. Overall, we have obvious concerns about the impact of a 900-foot tower immediately adjacent to 50 Vanderbilt, as you could see from the diagrams today. We know that there are city processes and protections in place. but the demolition of the existing building and the construction of this 900-foot tower are of great worry to us. We've been good neighbors to our community for the last 100 years, and we seek to be great neighbors for the next 100. That is all we ask of the community today, simply the time to understand and internalize what's being planned, to act as neighbors and citizens and participants in an active dialogue. We remain committed to this East Midtown community, this neighborhood we've existed in all these years, and humbly request the time to ensure the future health of that community. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any, or pass over to my colleague Kevin, who might have a few more technical considerations. But thank you, Layla, and the entire committee for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Dov. The next person who has his hand up is Roman Jonjairo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. You're now permitted to speak.
Good evening. My name is John Jairo Roman, and I'm a member of 32BJ SEIU. As you know, 32BJ is the largest property service union, representing 85,000 property service workers across the city. We represent workers who maintain, clean, and provide security services in buildings like the one being discussed at 343 Madison Avenue. We estimate that this rezoning, which will allow the construction of almost 1 million gross square feet of commercial office space, will lead to the creation of 29 cleaner, 13 security, and other new building service jobs. We believe that the best way to make sure that developments like the one proposed have a positive impact on building service workers is for the developers to make a formal commitment to pay the prevailing wage. We are pleased to let you know that the developer affiliated with this project, Boston Properties, has a track record of creating good jobs throughout their portfolio and a long-time partnership with 32BJ. BXP has reached out to make an early and credible commitment to create prevailing wage building service jobs at this site. We have full confidence that BXP will continue to be a responsible employer and presence in the community and are in support of this project. We know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive in Manhattan. We need good paying jobs that can lift our neighbors up. On behalf of 32BJ SEIU, I respectfully urge you to approve this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see no other hands up. Oh yeah, I see Kevin Lushton. You are allowed to speak and you can go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just continuing on where Dave Gandhi left off. I'm here as vice president of the Yale Club, but I'm also a registered architect in the states of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Florida, and Utah. While I was chairman of the House Committee at the Yale Club, I also had the pleasure of leading the Yale Club's voluntary effort to be landmarked with the New York City LPC. I'm also on the board of directors for the New York Landmarks Preservation Foundation. As I viewed the proposal put forth by Boston Properties, I'm concerned both professionally and personally by several key items. We feel we need clarification on these items before we can move ahead with a vote on our side for approval or disapproval of the project, support or not supporting the project. We accordingly, as Dave said, request a delay in the committee's vote. There's much that we at the Yale Club do not know, or at least are just beginning to explore. For instance, what's the treatment of the facade along the club's property line going to be? How will the new building relate to the club's landmark facade in terms of scale, detailing, materials, and proportion? We are concerned about the cantilever over the MTA access building. Without a bigger setback there, there could be and will be several long-term negative operating implications for the club's functioning, including how will rain, snow, and ice be deflected off of the proposed building? How will this impact our roof, where we house not only our HVAC equipment, but one of our main dining facilities? We have some 150 food service related employees who will be directly impacted by these answers. But more technically, we have some questions regarding what type of impact will there be from the new building's mechanical systems, its air intakes and exhausts? What will the impact of those systems have on our facility? We're concerned about potential sources of noise and loss of light from the west and what the effect that will have on 10 floors of westward facing guest rooms that we have in our building and our 20th floor ballroom banquet space. We're still not clear about what type of shadow will be cast on the club, specifically on our rooftop outdoor dining. But more importantly, particularly for CB5, we believe we've got very serious concerns about the viability of an active street life on 44th Street. Where the loading dock is proposed, we have suffered years of horrible conditions, starting with the construction of the MTA vent shaft building, which went on for many years, then COVID, and now the demolition of 343 Madison and its replacement building. 44th Street is a major east-west thoroughfare from Grand Central to the west side. At present, we are the only retail on the block, and we'd like to see more retail there. Specifically, we're concerned about the plan to include a 3-truck bay loading dock on 44th Street, which precludes the opportunity for retail there. But one of our principal concerns, as it always is with our people. At our peak of normal operations, the club employs some 300 folks. Due to COVID, we were forced to reduce staffing and furlough the rest of the staff. Our ability to recall and reemploy these people is at risk due to the challenges of operating a club with a demolition project occurring next door and several years of disruptive construction. Our staff is our family and our lifeblood. They are an integral part of the community of Midtown East. Each of them supports a family, so we simply must know what is in store for them, what's in store for the Yale Club and for the community on 44th and 45th Streets. We need transparency, communication, which includes Community Board 5 and our elected officials, to make sure that everyone knows what is planned, what is being done, and to reduce the concerns that our staff members and neighbors have so that we can continue to be a neighbor for another 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I would really strongly urge the applicants to get in contact with the Yale Club. Maybe there's an opportunity to actually give them a presentation so that members are aware of what is being proposed, and any possible mitigations on construction and issues of that type can be discussed and hopefully can be mitigated.
Thank you, Leila. Yes, that's a shared goal for us. We certainly will do so.
Okay, great. I will say that we certainly very much appreciate that the Yale Club is a big stakeholder in this project. I do understand that maybe more members of the Yale Club are present on the call. I very much appreciate that, it was, the comments were summarized and delivered by 2 members. We do have another item after this this application tonight, so I just want to be mindful of the time commitment for members of the committee.
Yeah, and Leila, just if I may, just briefly, and we also are aware of the many Yale Club members on this call. There has been meetings and communication with the Yale Club. I recognize and I'm receptive here that there's a broader group and there are larger discussions that need to happen, but we have begun those engagements and look forward to continuing.
Okay, great, fantastic. All right, so going back to our public comments, I do not see any hands up. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, then we're going to move to business session. Okay, so seeing none, we're moving back to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to speak. Members of the public and the applicants are no longer allowed to speak unless recognized by the chair. EJ, I will turn this question to you. I think that my big takeaway from this session is that we have made great progress in better understanding what the proposal is about. We're left with still a number of questions. I just want to make sure this is not my individual and personal view, and would love to hear your thoughts.
I agree entirely, particularly from a transit perspective. I think we received a tremendous amount of material 2 days ago that as it was certified, at least, that we've done our best job to review and was summarized, very helpfully by the applicant tonight. That having been said, I think it would be extremely useful to continue to dig into some of the particulars and numbers and specific questions that we heard both from the committee and the members of the public tonight over, more of the allotted 60-day period, and continue to get answers to and address some of the specific questions, over that time. We also heard from several members of the public that, simply as a core request that the entire community take more time to consider, what we've just heard and what was just certified 2 days ago. So, I'm 100% supportive of, I think, continuing the discussion, quote unquote, offline over the coming weeks, circling up as a joint committee again at some point to continue and finalize the, evaluation of the application. And for that matter, we know that the applicant is going to CB6 and is at, I believe, waiting, another full month from now almost to go before CB6. So there's I think we have considerable time to work with, and I'm totally supportive of that, Leila.
Okay. I don't know if members of the committee feel the need for a comment period now, given that we're not going to take any action on this particular application at this moment. If you believe that it is important that we do, a round of comments, we can do that. If you feel that those comments would be more meaningful at the next session, we will have a chance to dig deeper into the material. We can also do that. So if anyone has a comment right now, raise your hand. Otherwise, once again, we have one more item to review by the Land Use Committee, so we can certainly put this time to good use. Okay, I see no hands going up. I will consider that we can defer the comment period altogether to the next session. I will say a big thank you to the applicants. Their presentation was very robust and very well put together. We also appreciate all the outreach prior to this meeting. They've been in communication with CB5. We really appreciate that. One thought for everybody's consideration, this is something that we've done in the past. If the applicant is able to accommodate an on-site tour of the transit upgrades. This at times actually goes a long way in really, allowing the committee members to understand what these improvements are. So I'm just throwing it out there. If it's a possibility in the short time window that we have before we reconvene to organize such a tour, that would be great. If not, totally understand that it's logistically at times also a little complicated. So we can certainly follow up on that with the board office. All right, so with all of that being said, we are going to adjourn the joint session of the Transportation and Environment and Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Community Board 5, and then we will move right into the land use meeting.
So T&E members who are not also members of land use, you're done and you may adjourn. Members of both committees, like myself, are going to stay.
Thank you, EJ. Thank you, Layla, for the time tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll speak to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so moving on. We are now in the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of CB5 monthly meeting. Thank you all for your patience. The Department of City Planning is with us tonight to present a citywide zoning text amendment that is called Zoning for Accessibility. And I'm not going to say any more about it. They will actually get the floor and tell us all about it. So I'm not sure who is presenting for DCP.
I'll be leading off and I'll give a little intro. This is Ezra here.
Ezra, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for your patience.
All right, I'll wait for Ozka to be able to share her screen. All right, wonderful. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having us at this meeting. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Ozka Mohyuddin and Chris Lee from Department of City Planning. And we also have Moon Sun Park with us from the MTA as well. We're here to present the Zoning for Accessibility text amendment, which was a collaborative proposal developed jointly by MTA and the City of New York. And Moon Sun and Ozka will go through a brief overview of the text amendment, which aims to improve ADA access throughout the city. And if you want to hear more information about the proposal, we obviously are available for questions. And we also have some information like a detailed project summary and an annotated zoning text on the website that you can see on screen, and annotated zoning text being, translating it very much into, plain English terms from zoning. And as usual, again, we're able to follow up on any questions that we can't answer today at the following meetings. So we also should note that official recommendations from the community boards, as well as borough boards and borough president, are all requested by June 14th. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Moon Sun to go over the purpose and need behind the proposal. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Ezra. We can go to the next slide. Good evening. My name is Moon Sun Park. I am with the MTA Transit Oriented Development Group. Thank you so much for your time this evening. As Ezra said, the MTA, the Department of City Planning, and the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities are proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to provide more opportunities for the MTA to collaborate with developers to get to system-wide accessibility more quickly. This initiative comes out of a 2019 City Council report titled Zoning for Transit Accessibility, which recommended zoning changes to increase transit accessibility. Our proposal includes two components. The first component is a system-wide transit easement requirement. The second component is an expansion of a transit improvement bonus to the highest density areas in the city. Next slide, please. As many of us know, the subway system is over 100 years old, with most stations built before 1950. Which makes making them accessible very challenging. And while the MTA has made progress in increasing accessibility, including 11 new ADA stations last year alone, we still have a long way to go. Currently, 136 out of the 493 subway and Staten Island railway stations are accessible, which comes out to about 28% of all stations. And 25 out of the 39 commuter rail stations in the city limits are accessible. Next slide, please. What that means is that with less than 1/3 of our subway stations accessible, it makes navigating our subway system extremely difficult for those who need an accessible station. This affects people with ambulatory disabilities, seniors, parents and guardians with young children, and people with temporary injuries. Someone who requires an accessible station will often have to take a circuitous trip, which adds many more minutes to their ride. Next slide, please. Over 1/4 of New Yorkers are potentially impacted by the lack of accessible stations. And this situation only becomes more pressing as the number of New Yorkers over 65 is growing at a faster rate than the total population. Next slide, please. The MTA is fully committed to station accessibility, as demonstrated by our current capital plan, which dedicates more than $5 billion towards making 77 more New York City Transit and commuter rail stations accessible within New York City. In Community District 5, 4 stations are designated for accessibility improvements in this capital program, and they are the 59th and Lex Station, 7th Avenue, 42nd and Bryant Park, and 14th Street and 6th Avenue. And once the capital program is complete, 43% of our subway stations will be fully accessible, and a subway rider will not be more than 2 stations away from an accessible station in all 5 boroughs. But we need more tools in our toolbox to help us get to system-wide accessibility. Zoning for accessibility is such a tool. It should be noted that zoning for accessibility will not replace, but only supplement MTA's capital commitments. Next slide, please. So as noted earlier, our stations are decades old, and they're in a dense city such as New York, presenting a long list of challenges to make them accessible. For example, finding space for elevator shafts within and around our old and complex stations is extremely challenging. We have many stations with narrow platforms, tight entrances, and tight turnstile areas. Outside of our stations, particularly the elevated stations, the sidewalks are often narrow with limited space between the buildings and the elevated platforms to accommodate a sidewalk elevator. And you can see that in the image to the right. And when we do put elevators in the sidewalks, we often have to relocate underground utilities, which significantly adds to the cost and time of installing elevators. Getting an easement within a building for future station access points, such as an elevator, is an example of how zoning for accessibility will help address these challenges, while also alleviating crowded sidewalk conditions. I will now turn the presentation over to Aska at City Planning to explain the details of our proposal.
Thank you, Vincent. So as Vincent mentioned in her overview of all the challenges, I want to go over first some of the existing zoning regulations that we do have in place. Specifically, there are 2 transit-related zoning provisions that ZFA is seeking to expand on. First, we have a transit easement requirement, and second, we have the station improvement bonuses. By leveraging station access improvements in places where investment is already occurring, these provisions speed up the construction of station improvements for increased accessibility. However, these current provisions have certain limitations that ZFA is aiming to address. First, let's look at the current easement provisions. They address the challenges of locating new stations, entrances, and other transit amenities. An easement is a small permanent space reserved in a building for a transit agency to use in the future. Transit easements have traditionally been used to provide space for new station entrances, passageways, or ancillary facilities that support subway lines, such as emergency egress or ventilation structures. However, the existing easement provisions are limited to a few areas in the city, such as along 2nd Avenue for the 2nd Avenue subway line. As a result, there have been missed opportunities for MTA to locate ADA access at optimal locations on development sites next to a station. Second, the zoning resolution also contains the transit bonus mechanism, which CD5 is familiar with, to support the creation of transit improvements. In the densest commercial districts in the city, we've incentivized developers to both provide the space and to construct station improvements, including ADA access through floor area bonuses that provide additional development rights. However, these provisions are also limited to sites immediately next to a subway station in or near central business districts in certain areas of the city. That is where ZFA comes in. We are aiming to address some of these limitations through zoning for accessibility. This proposal seeks to create more opportunities for accessibility throughout the transit system through expanding these zoning tools available to us. ZFA proposes to first expand the easement requirements system-wide to most station adjacent sites and provide zoning flexibilities on sites where easements are provided to offset potential burdens on development feasibility. And second, to increase participation in the transit bonus program by increasing its area of applicability to other high density areas in the city. I will now go through the first component of this proposal, the system-wide easement requirement. This would require all developments and enlargements on zoning lots of at least 5,000 square feet within 50 feet of a mass transit station and in applicable zoning districts to file an application with the MTA and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission to determine whether or not an easement is needed on that zoning lot. However, while the certification will be required for all sites within 50 feet of a transit station, it is anticipated that MTA will only ask for an easement in limited places that are best suited for access or require other improvements. Looking specifically at Community District 5, this illustrative map shows where ZFA would be applicable. The red line shows the boundary of CD5. The light green dots show the stations where the proposed easement requirement would be in place, which in CD5 includes all the stations. The dark green areas on the map show zoning lots within 50 feet of an eligible station where an easement may be required for developments or enlargements. The transit agency, in consultation with the developer and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission, would determine this necessary easement for future station upgrades. Depending on the needs of the individual station, transit easements could vary in shape and size. For example, vertical easement volumes can take up several floors, as seen in this image, and horizontal easement volumes can vary depending on whether it's for an elevator or for a new station entrance. Because of this variation in easement shape and size, easement areas can affect development sites in a number of ways. The easement can take a floor area by occupying several floors on the site, restrict ground floor uses, and even create compatibility issues with surrounding uses. So without any zoning relief, a development could be limited from building to its full potential. To make sure an easement creates minimal challenges for construction on a given site, the zoning will provide targeted relief to sites required to provide an easement. The categories of relief are floor area and open space, height and setback, parking, use allowances, and streetscape provisions. I will now go over 4 of these provisions that apply in CD5. The proposed floor area and open space relief includes excluding the easement from floor area calculations. This allows the development to reach its maximum FAR despite the easement. And to make sure easements are placed at an optimal location on site, they would be considered permitted obstructions, and where applicable, maximum lot coverage would be increased. This doesn't apply as much for CD5 since most of the districts are non-contextual, but the proposed height modifications would allow for sites to increase their maximum height by 10 feet to allow for developable area space that would be taken up by an easement. There would also be greater street wall flexibility provided within 15 feet of easements to create better flow around those spaces. Use allowances are proposed to help activate spaces around easements. This includes allowing vacant easements to be temporarily used as commercial spaces and allowing local retail uses within 30 feet of easements in residential districts. Modifications to streetscape requirements would be provided by excluding general streetscape rules like zoning, like ground floor use regulations, transparency rules, and plantings. And to ensure the safety of transit users entering and leaving stations, curb cuts would be restricted within 30 feet of an easement. Every site is unique and has potential additional challenges, so this proposal also allows for further flexibility for uniquely constrained sites through an additional authorization. Again, not relevant for CB3 as CB5 as much because of the non-contextual districts, but sites could seek an additional height increase of up to 25%. If they request more height relief beyond that, they would need a special permit. While the easement requirement only applies to developments and enlargements on sites with a lot area of at least 5,000 square feet and in applicable zoning districts, easements may also be provided voluntarily on smaller sites. For those sites that choose to provide an easement, the same zoning relief would apply. This concludes the first part of the proposed CFA. I will now go over the bonus provisions. So the second piece of this proposal is an expansion of the transit bonus program that would be optional for sites that are near a mass transit station. As mentioned earlier, today's subway bonus mechanism grants a floor area bonus of up to 20% for a significant station improvement, but only applies to station adjacent sites in limited areas of the city. With ZFA, the proposed transit bonus would 1, continue to grant a floor area bonus of up to 20% of the maximum floor area ratio for developments and enlargements that construct station improvements, and it will expand to the geography where a transit bonus can be used. The bonus will be subject to discretionary review process in the form of an authorization by the City Planning Commission. The proposed bonus would expand the geography to other high density areas, including all R9 and R10 districts in the city, their commercial equivalents, and M16 districts. The new transit bonus would allow sites that are within 500 feet of a station to participate in the program in exchange for an off-site improvement that will be constructed at a station that is not immediately adjacent to the site. In central business districts, this would expand to 1,500 feet. This illustrative map shows the expansion of the bonus provision applicability in Community District 5. The blue dots show the current program's applicability, which includes most stations. The pink dots show the station where the proposed transit bonus would now be applicable, expanding the program to 8 additional stations in CD5. The sites highlighted in orange are eligible sites within 500 feet of the station, and the ones highlighted in purple are the eligible sites within 1,500 feet of a station in the central business district that would now be able to participate in the program for offsite improvements. To receive a bonus, a development must construct a significant station improvement. The improvements can vary depending on the station needs and the bonus amounts out. However, if a station doesn't have ADA access, that must be the first improvement provided. The amount of bonus would be proportional to the improvements provided, up to 20%. The floor area generated from the bonus may only be occupied once the MTA determines that such improvements are usable by the public. If needed, developments could seek additional relief from zoning provisions, depending on what the applicant seeks. Modifications may either be subject to an authorization that would allow a height increase of up to 25%, or a special permit if further height relief is needed. Other relief that would be made available through discretionary review and approval includes modifications to use, parking, loading, and streetscape. Modifications pursuant to the authorization or special permit will be subject to specific findings to prove the relief is necessary. So in conclusion, zoning for accessibility proposes 1, a system-wide easement certification requirement for all developments or enlargements on a minimum of 5,000 square feet lot within 50 feet of an MTA station in applicable zoning districts. There is also a voluntary option for smaller lots and conversions within applicable zoning districts. This is the only non-discretionary review proposed. Second, ZFA also proposes an expansion of the transit bonus program, which allows a floor area bonus in exchange for significant transit improvements through an authorization. Both the easement and the bonus provisions also allow for further zoning modifications due to possible unique site conditions through additional discretionary review. An authorization would be required for modification, including a height increase of up to 25%, and a special permit is required for further modifications. As mentioned in the beginning, we are currently in the public review process of this text amendment. We're asking for your recommendations for the City Planning Commission about this proposal. Official recommendations from all 59 community boards, borough boards, and borough presidents are requested by June 14th. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much for a great presentation. Let's jump right in. Members of the committee, do you have questions? You can use the raise hand function. John, you have a question, go ahead.
Thanks. I wonder if, well, first of all, thank you for the presentation, very informative, and also something that I think that, that we definitely need to expand, station access. I wanted to know if there was a consideration to focus on stations that are not already ADA friendly, especially for the easement in granting bonus FAR. So, for example, we do have major transportation hub stations such as Penn Station, Herald Square, Union Square in our district that are already ADA accessible. So, one could make an argument that they could be a lower priority for increasing ADA accessibility, whereas some stations such as Bryant Park are not ADA accessible, but also in a central business district. So I was just wondering if there was a consideration to like the prioritization for the sites that you hope to increase accessibility for.
And then do you want to answer that from MTA's prioritization?
Well, I just want to get clarification. Are you asking in relationship to how we just prioritize in general, or as it relates to zoning for accessibility?
For the latter. Basically, I'm just trying to, when I look at the map of eligible stations, I do just see that there are several of the stations that could benefit from easements, are already stations that are ADA accessible, whereas we have many stations that are not ADA accessible. So I just wonder about how this, configures with your prioritization plans for inaccessible stations.
Well, I think I'm going to punt this to Chris Lee from City Planning Zoning Division, who was involved in, really the analysis and identifying, how certain districts were selected for both the easement certification requirement as well as for the bonus provision. Chris, would you mind?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Lee from the Zoning Division. So that's a very good question. Thank you. Easements and the bonus provisions could be applied to all sorts of accessibility improvements or any sort of upgrades that are needed for stations. But certainly if a development site is required to provide an easement, or if an applicant, a developer, is pursuing the bonus, the MTA will certainly prioritize accessibility where accessibility does not exist or where a station is only partially accessible. But in terms of the zoning itself, the zoning text, we are allowing for other types of improvements. So if a station is already fully accessible, and if a site is, if the closest station, or if the only station that a development is able to provide an improvement at, and it's already fully accessible, we are also allowing for other types of improvements to be provided there. Does that?
I'm gonna jump right in and admit that I'm not sure I understand how this whole thing works. So let's say that I'm a developer, I own a site. My site is actually not close to, and it's in CB5, you know, in the central business district. And my site is actually not above a train station. I'm actually a subway station. I'm actually really interested in this bonus. I want to get as much density as I can, and I want to use this this opportunity. How does one relate to the other? I assume that the existing subway station is probably surrounded by a built environment. So this built environment already exists. How do you go about putting a, let's say, an escalator, or let's say an elevator leading from the street level down to the station, while giving the bonus to a site that is 1,500 feet away from the entrance? Can you actually walk us through how that process?
Sure. Do you want me to take that, Chris?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
You go ahead first and all that.
So if you're a developer in your district and you're interested in getting a bonus under the expanded zoning bonus provision, which I think is the example that you're raising, depending on where your development site is located, and depending on whether you're in the central business district or a non-central business district, but let's just say you're outside of a central business district, you would draw a radius of, you would see if you're within 500 feet and of any applicable station. So if you fall within, for example, because there are so many stations within this district, if you happen to have 2 stations within 500 feet of your development site.
Let's keep it simple. It's one station, I am in the central business district, and I'm 1,500 feet away from the site. I still don't see how you can build an elevator on somebody else's site while receiving
it wouldn't be an elevator on someone else's site. It would be depending on obviously what the station needs are. It could be a sidewalk elevator going down to the mezzanine level of a station, or it could be improvements within the station. It could be mezzanine to platform elevator. It could be a combination of improvements. So it wouldn't be inside your development site.
Got it. Okay. This is where I was confused with that. Okay.
It wouldn't be on someone else's development site, no.
Okay, and go over the easement situation again. So basically, any new development would have to give an easement to the MTA for the possibility of building a new entrance.
So for the so it's not that every development would have to give a easement over. It's rather they will have to go through a certification process. So if they are within 50 feet of a mass transit station in those applicable zoning districts, they will have to go and get a certification from both the MTA and the chair of the City Planning Commission that will determine if an easement is required at that site or not. So not every site will be ideal for the MTA to locate an easement for, or they might not need an easement for that specific site. So it won't be for every single of those sites that are shown in the map. It's rather that's all the sites that will have to go through this process.
And I jump in and just add that we actually have similar provisions today, where a developer is required to, consult with the MTA and get like a certification, saying that essentially, the MTA says this is actually not an appropriate place for an easement. So it's, similar mechanisms are in place and have been used before.
But I was under the impression that it was sort of like the other way around. It's the MTA that says we actually like this site a lot and we want an easement so that we can create an entrance. That was the example with the Rudin management property, where basically they had to provide and give an easement to MTA so that they can create an entrance to East Side access.
No, it's the opposite. It's for developments and enlargements that meet the criteria. If they're 5,000 square feet or larger, they're within 50 feet of our station, and they're fall within the eligible zoning districts. And this is citywide. The origin of this particular provision of zoning for accessibility comes out of us realizing that over the past several years, we have missed a few opportunities to work with developers to secure an easement for an elevator. And because of that, we ended up, or we're going to have to put an elevator in a less optimal location, and leading to a much more circuitous path of travel for elevator users. We really don't anticipate that many easements, but it is about making sure that we don't miss out on those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue with questions from members of the committee. Julie, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
A couple of questions. I'm curious how you guys define high density areas. Is it the R9, R10 that you listed in one of your slides, or do you have a map where areas of the city is shown where this would be applicable?
Yeah, so for the easement provision, it is R9 and R10, and their commercial equivalents and M16, as well as the central business district. The central business district is for the bonus.
So currently the zoning for accessibility is just within Manhattan. Would you say, I'm just curious how far it extends across the city?
So the easement provisions would apply to most zoning districts that support multifamily dwelling units and their commercial equivalents, as well as all manufacturing districts. It's the bonus provisions that would only apply to R9 and R10 districts, their commercial equivalents, and M16 districts. So it happens so that there's a lot of places in Manhattan that would be covered by the bonus.
Do you want to show the map, Oscar?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the map.
There's a citywide map.
I don't have a citywide in this slide deck.
I thought there was one. It's slide 25. Yeah, you can see where it expands to. So all of the purple dots are the stations that would now benefit, that would benefit under the expanded bonus provision. Currently, only the blue stations are eligible to benefit from the ZR 74634 and other bonus provisions. But it would expand to a few stations in the South Bronx, stations in Jamaica, Queens, a few more stations in downtown Brooklyn, as well as all those other stations in Manhattan.
But this is just for the bonus provision. Again, the easement provision expands further than this.
Yes, the easement provision would cover 94% of stations in New York City.
94%.
94% of stations. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate this program that you guys are trying to make the city more inclusive. My only other comment is that if the zoning for accessibility is going to expand and include other aspects of accessibility besides the physical, I brought up public bathrooms earlier this evening, and I know MTA has a lot of bathroom infrastructure, but did not have the funding to renovate and reopen a lot of them. But public bathrooms is reopening them, providing access would be part of accessibility and making the city more inclusive. And I just hope that this group of different agencies would work together to look at some kind of incentive in that aspect.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Next question goes to Mike Willie. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I'm trying to understand if Bryant Park Station right now has 3 sets of elevators that lead from the sidewalk to the platform, and not the platform, to the station mezzanine level, but there's no elevators going to the platform. Would a building be able to choose a different kind of a other type of accessibility option or something else other than the needed elevator that goes from the mezzanine to the platform? Or how is it a menu of choices, or does the MTA have a priority list for each station? How does it work?
So first I'll address 42nd Bryant Park. It is an unusual situation where we do have a number of street to mezzanine elevators. And that was because the developers were obligated to provide, to push the sidewalks stairs into their buildings as a result of the sidewalk stair relocation requirement in the zoning resolution, and then also to provide an elevator because there was no elevator access. But under our capital program, we will be providing the 2 platform elevators to make that station fully accessible. But just going back to your question, if it were, if let's just say it wasn't in our capital program and a developer were interested, yes, we would have the conversation and we would be prioritizing what our needs are for our station in terms of improvements. Accessibility is usually one of the first priorities for improvements for any station. But in addition, there are often other types of access and circulation improvements that come along with that scope.
I'd also note that for that particular issue too, developers in the East Midtown framework are eligible to undertake a series of improvements to that station to bring additional platform to mezzanine elevators. So although that's been identified for, as per what Moonsun said, their private development also has the opportunity to deliver that sooner, potentially, if there was, a development that met the criteria for undertaking transit improvements. Not every single one is eligible, but so that's an issue that's been flagged, and there are avenues for delivering that.
Yeah, well, maybe it was a wrong example to use Bryant Park, but we have the same thing at Union Square for the 4, 5, and 6 platforms too.
That is outside the purview of East Midtown, but understood.
Just to make sure I understand, is that new provision of this citywide zoning text cumulative with existing transit for zoning provisions? So could technically a a developer in East Midtown use the provisions of the East Midtown text and get an additional bonus through this program?
I can answer that question. So East Midtown is quite different. They have a specific land use and transit improvement framework over there. In East Midtown, what we define as qualifying sites, this bonus will not apply to those type of sites. So we're leaving the East Midtown framework alone. However, there are sites that are considered non-qualifying sites in the zoning within the East Midtown framework. For instance, a building that is primarily residential, for instance, would be able to apply for this bonus, but it would really just be a swap in what is already available in that in that floor area structure for those types of sites. And the other difference would be that the radius of applicability for these sites and how far you can provide this improvement to a station, that would be one of the newer features. And the second feature would be that it would, instead of being a special permit, it would be an authorization now, where it would just go through to the City Planning Commission.
So just to provide a little additional clarity, if you're using the East Midtown framework, you can't use this bonus on top of it specifically. This now an authorization.
Okay, so although, for example, JP Morgan Chase was not a qualifying site, they would not have been able to use this provision if they had chosen to.
Non-qualifying sites are already able to access the existing transit bonus that we have today. And so zoning for accessibility would literally be swapping and replacing that existing subway bonus mechanism with the new one.
Well, there was no subway bonus mechanism for them.
It depends on locationally. Certain sites may have been eligible if they're close enough to a station, previously, but now the radius of applicability is being expanded. But again, to be a qualifying site, you have to have, wide street frontage. You have to demolish your, a certain amount of your building, and then you have to also, conform with a bunch of East Midtown regs. And that way you can increase your floor area. If you're choosing not to use that, or if you're like an interior lot that couldn't even use them in the first place, then this option could be available to you depending where you're located.
Okay. All right. More questions from members of the committee. I see that John, Julie, and Mike, you still have your hands up. I don't know if it's just that you had asked questions or if you have any follow-ups.
Yeah, I have another one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
In the application for in the materials, it says that for the bonus program, that mandatory and voluntary inclusionary housing areas, the additional floor area generated for the transit bonus, it says that it would not be subject to affordable housing requirements. So does that basically mean that the 20% maximum bonus FAR that these buildings could apply for would have no need to adhere to any affordable housing requirements?
The 20% additional floor area that is generated through this transit bonus would not be subject to the inclusionary housing requirements.
That's odd.
The reason being is because we want to tie, the amount of additional floor area that is granted through this transit bonus mechanism would be tied to the amount of transit improvement that is provided and the general, the benefits that it would provide to the general public. Inclusionary housing and the additional floor area that would get through either the R10 program or the voluntary inclusionary housing program is tied to another set of floor area that would be given to that specific development. So it's really connecting, directly connecting the floor area increase through the bonus with the transit improvement that is being provided there.
Thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, I have a question of my own. The part that I struggle with here is that a bonus is basically a multiplier that is applied to the size of a lot. So in the case of a developer who has, one lot that they want to redevelop, it's, the development sites. I can see the metrics and I can see the math adding up. But we know that developers in our district are very savvy and they are very, very good at doing massive lot mergers. So this particular provision would actually be a huge incentive to actually create a lot merger so that the bonus that you are applying, this 20% increase, you're basically applying it to the entire merged lot and not to the development site. And then you would generate with this particular text, tremendous added density to the development site. So have you given any thought to that? And what are the measures in the text that would prevent this kind of overdevelopment? Because I certainly appreciate that this is not the intention of the zoning text amendment. The intention is not to create, a proliferation of density in our districts. The spirit of the text is really to augment and increase and improve accessibility. So have you given any thought of, this possible unintended consequences?
So if you guys want to speak to anything around zoning lot mergers, generally have at it. But first, I would like to say that one of the things related to this is that these types of mergers, which do increase your zoning lot area and thereby would increase your bonus, these are permitted under zoning. But in the case of the transit development, if a developer were to do something like what you described, they would also be required to undertake a commensurate amount of transit improvements in order to earn that bonus. So if somebody, enlarged their site from 10,000 to 100,000 square feet, let's say, and they were doing a 3 FAR bonus, it's true that they would be able to generate a much larger bonus, but they would have to be undertaking several echelons more worth of transit improvements in order to generate it. So in that respect, we don't view it as a loophole. But Chris, do you want to speak at all to zoning lot mergers writ large and anything that zoning's been looking into?
Well, yeah, the zoning lot merger question is sort of, beyond the scope of the zoning for accessibility proposal. It's something that currently exists in how zoning works today. So it's not just specific to zoning for accessibility, but it's just generally how zoning works.
Okay, so just to be clear, we certainly appreciate that we've been the victims of, lot mergers that really ended up hurting and harming our district. One prime example is what happened along 57th Street and Central Park South with these super tall buildings that only exist, they exist because of lot mergers and also because of mechanical voids. The model that was chosen for the theater sub-district actually has a provision that you cannot increase the added density to a development site by more than 20%. So the notion that you would actually limit the amount of density that you can pile up on a development site is something that is very common in the zoning text of New York. I'm just a little concerned that, or maybe you need to walk us through how do you commensurate the amount of density as it relates to the improvements? Because right now, what it looks like from what you're telling us is that it is a 20% maximum bonus, and that is regardless of the size of the lot. So I think it would be helpful if you would actually walk us through, if you have a lot of that size, then you multiply it by 20%, and this is your added density. And then you have to provide an escalator. If your site is 10 times the size, you get 10 times the amount of density, but then you have to build an escalator, an elevator, it has to go all the way to the track. And you need to, if you can actually walk us through the process, the discretionary process by which the commission is going to authorize these bonuses, I think it would be very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'll just jump in. These are, discretionary special permits, or have been until this point in their nature. So it is case by case, and it's based on the precedent of previous projects. As you guys are familiar with, there have been a number of these in your district. We, generally, again, use the past precedent for establishing what's commensurate in terms of improvements, and it really depends project by project. The East Midtown framework did lay out, a number of improvements and square footage allotted to them. And it kind of goes over some of the levels of, how extensive each level is. And, that could be interpreted as a rule of thumb for these, but it really is, case by case.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, so seeing none, let's move to opening up the floor to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public who have questions or comments for the applicant? Any questions or comments? Yeah, I see that Jim Wright has his hand up. Jim, you're going to be permitted to talk and you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Jim Wright. I'm a CB5 resident. I'm here speaking in support of DCP Zoning for Accessibility Initiative, both for myself as a resident and as a representative of the American Institute of Architects, New York, also known as AIA New York. We are the professional association representing New York City's public and private sector architects. It's opportune to follow the 343 Madison project ahead of us on the agenda, as it clearly illustrates the potential benefits of public-private coordination to incorporate off-street transit entrances and related transit improvements associated with private real estate development projects. In its Fast Forward plan released in 2019, the MTA renewed its commitment to modernize its public transit networks in its upcoming capital construction programs. Significantly, over 50 additional transit stations would be made accessible during the first 5-year period, with up to another 130 in following years. AIA New York strongly supports the MTA's system-wide accessibility commitments, as well as the MTA's current 5-year capital construction program, which starts the process. The MTA's accessibility program is ambitious, both in scope and capital outlay. To help achieve these program goals, the ZFA initiative would expand the existing transit district zoning coverage and provide more flexible transit entrance options associated with private real estate development projects in the city's highest density districts like CD5. This frees up the MTA's limited capital resources to focus on accessible stations in less dense neighborhoods without similar private development potential. An obvious co-benefit is the relief provided from overcrowded public sidewalks and public open spaces. Although I am a fan of the iconic historic NYC sidewalk subway stairs, in many locations there is just not enough space along with pedestrians and other activities on the sidewalk. Adding even wider sidewalk elevators further compounds the congestion. As we have seen, there's examples of successful transit station improvements that have occurred as part of private redevelopment projects. Unfortunately, we've seen also many other opportunities that have been missed, often a once-in-a-generation missed chance to make a substantial transit entrance improvement at that location. A task force of architects within the AIA New York has followed this initiative as it evolved within the City Council Land Use Division, the Department of City Planning, and the MTA. We believe that the expanded ZFA initiative will provide effective tools to help achieve the goals of a more accessible transit network and less congested public sidewalks. We also believe that the proposal reasonably balances the interests of public and private sector in accomplishing these goals. Having listened to the discussion before me, CB5 has asked very good questions about the details of the proposal by testing how it might work in real life situations. This feedback is valuable to the city and the MTA. So I urge the committee to consider the merits of the proposal and recommend CB5's support along with your suggestions for improvements. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak and share my observations.
Thank you. More comments from members of the public or questions from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, we are going to move back to business session During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. Members of the public and the applicants are no longer allowed to speak unless recognized by the chair. So I know it's late. I think although we do have the opportunity to actually take a vote for this particular application next month, we would still be in the time frame. I think that, we don't want to overload ourselves at the June meeting. So it may be wise, if you feel comfortable, if you feel that you have enough information about this proposal, to actually take it to a vote. So I see some hands up. I will start with Dave Achilles. Dave, go ahead. Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, and are the members of the committee still, not the committee, but the people who work at the MTA, are they still on board here? Okay, Yes, thank you. Good. Thank you. Just a couple of real life observations about what happens at 55th Street and 7th Avenue, the subway there. Well before COVID, the construction was into its second year. I know it's very hard to do this elevator construction in the subway system, but over 2 years is a long period of time, and evidently they found pipes from Con Ed, so there was not talk between Con Ed and the construction. As well, the construction crews were famous at 55th Street for operating and violating their work permits, getting there early, working late. The compressors were put... Dave, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. As much as I think that the point you're making is well taken and important, I really want to focus on commenting on the application that is in front of us, which in essence doesn't have to do with the situation you're describing, because it's going to be a new zoning text that would take effect. So I think that, just to summarize, I think we're all cognizant that, the construction of these accessibility equipment and amenities are a complicated affair. We all know the statistics that, half of the escalators are malfunctioning or something along those lines. I really urge the committee to really stay focused on the application, the applicability of this text amendment and how it will relate to CB5, while also being mindful that, construction can be a really tricky and complicated affair. I understand. I can make a brief comment about the application, exactly echoing your points about the easement mitigations, abusements that we have seen in our district. Be aware of that. I want those people at the MTA to be aware that we've seen a lot of abuse of mitigations. And also in the future, we would hope someday that developers would make these improvements to the mass transit without seeking bonuses or relief. That would be our hope for the future. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. In order for that to happen, they would have to be mandatory, and it is a possibility, but it is not what is in front of us. Next comment, Aaron. Aaron, go ahead.
Hi. I think coming off the last presentation, I think, that just having the context, but I think the challenge here is I fully support, right, all the accessibility. This is something that should have happened 30 years ago. The MTA, it should maintain the stations. There's a lot of issues here, and that definitely should be happening and should be mandatory. We should not sacrifice, we should not give bonuses to developers to do stuff that should be happening already. And we can't tie those things together. This is that part of this proposal is a flawed methodology. We cannot add 20% bonuses to developments. Why are we adding density in order to fix subway stations that should be fixed? Like that should be part of the MTA's philosophy. And we should not be allowing developers to pay for more FAR in order to funnel money into the projects that should be happening already.
Thank you, Aaron. Clayton, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. I agree with Aaron's statement wholeheartedly. I also really do recognize the clearly very hard, thoughtful work that has gone into this proposal. And there's a lot about it that there's a lot to like, and there's a lot that I support. But as to whether or not we're going to take a position tonight, I think we have enough information. Personally, my main two sticking points for this proposal as is, above and beyond the overarching point that Aaron just made, which again, I do agree with, are number one, not having this be subject to MIH, I feel is a missed opportunity, and I don't understand the rationale. And it's just one of many, 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 many times over the last several years that we have seen DCP chip away at this proposal that initially seemed so promising, and that we have just seen it not able to take full fruition. And this is just yet another example of a missed opportunity for trying to actually let MIH do what it's supposed to do. So I find that problematic. And secondly, and more importantly, Leila, is to your point about the unintended consequences of the lot mergers and incentivizing density. It's very, very clear that this does that. And I know that Ezra said they don't consider it a loophole but I just don't buy that. And just like you said with the theater subdistrict, it can be done. So why on earth would we not give this text amendment the tiniest teeth so that we do not incentivize further density in our district that we have been so used to for so many years? So for those two reasons alone, I mean, I don't know if that would be a deny unless those things are done, or if we just deny this on the merits because we don't believe about the framework and principle. I leave that to the committee, but those are the 2 points that I have a problem with this proposal. Thank you, Clayton. I would say that we should all acknowledge that accessibility is really a priority. This is a priority that CB5 has advocated for probably for a decade or more. I think that the way this zoning text amendment is going about it has lots of flaws that we want to flag. We just want to make sure that our position is not muddled with or confused with being against accessibility. Nancy, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yes. I think that because a number of us don't quite understand everything about this text amendment, it leaves lots of opportunity for abuses by developers to get around things. There seem to be loopholes here. I don't know what they all are, but I'm leery of it. I think we definitely need to have accessible subway system throughout the city, but we don't all understand everything that's going on in this, and that's my concern. It's just, it should be more easily understandable. When it's not so easily understandable, it's open for abuse. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Nancy. Mike, you have your hand up.
I agree that this something like this text amendment is needed. I would hope that it would further codify that there is the rule of thumb that they're talking about from East Midtown is incorporated into the text amendment, whether it's open-ended or not, but it's still something, guidelines or formula to be included. And if it's not, then let's say what you were talking about with the theater subdistrict, the 20% bonus would apply to the development site only. And if they wanted the 20% for the whole zoning lot, then MIH would have to apply or something like that. There needs to be something more in the bonus qualifications. I think it's too heavy-handed, even though I support the general idea of it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Ryan, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
3 comments. First, I specifically want to acknowledge MTA and city planning taking this question on. I think we and others have raise the concerns we've had over the years and to acknowledge shortcomings in what has gone before. I think it's important to acknowledge that, and I do give some thanks to these agencies for doing that. Number two, we've also seen that these efforts are hard and expensive. And while I think on principle, of course, they should be happening, we have to find the resources somewhere. And so the idea that there is a trade that is required to help accelerate that is something that actually I'm fairly open to. My third comment, which is I'm unclear on what that trade actually is based on all of the conversation that's happened here tonight. And Nancy's point, I think, says it quite well. And so I too am concerned about either unintended consequences or intended consequences that we don't actually know and fully understand here. So this is something that in its frame, I would actually have a lot of openness to, but have some specific concerns about the fact that we don't know enough.
Thank you. EJ.
I won't repeat smart things that folks have already been said, except to say that I also believe that the idea of incentivizing these improvements is essential. You know, I think we might want them to just happen on their own or to be inspired by development, but I think we know that they need to either be incentivized or mandatory, and that incentivizing them is a good idea. But yeah, I agree that these are the rules we've heard and the concepts that we've heard are very complex, and I don't yet know that I have a good handle on how some of the incentives that we heard as part of the package tonight could be abused or sidestepped in various ways. And I think very careful consideration has to go into a lot of those concepts.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I will say that my main concern is that even if we were to assume that, you know, the transit upgrades would be commensurate to the amount of density that could be created because of a lot merger. Let's say that, you know, the development site is 10,000 square feet and that a lot merger is done for the entire block. Let's say it's, you know, 200,000 square feet. We know developers in our district are very savvy. We know that. We know that, you know, specific developers have become the masters at lot mergers. So even if they were to, you know, provide improvements that are commensurate with the amount of density that they are generating, we have to ask ourselves the question, when is this density too much for, you know, particular development sites, even if we're getting, you know, a good deal out of it. Now let's look at, you know, the metrics. We're basically told that, you know, there will be a rule of thumb and that it will be discretionary. For me, this is a recipe for disaster. We really don't want to put the commissioners in this role where they basically have to exercise their judgment and they can be influenced and they can be, you know, convinced in a way that becomes really difficult for them to make determinations. I think I would feel much more comfortable with, you know, some sort of a, you know, a rate of improvement. You know, if you're putting an escalator, then that's, you know, that much. And if you're doing a elevator, it's that much more. If it's going all the way to the platform, if it's stopping to the mezzanine. I mean, we have developed and we have created this framework, this analytic framework with MTA and with DCP for East Midtown. Let's continue to use it and let's formalize it. So as it stands, I think it would be prudent to really underscore that, you know, the text as it is drafted has room for unintended consequences. Once again, I don't think it is the intention of the MTA or DCP to actually increase and stimulate density in our district. I don't think that that's what they want. What they want is accessibility. I think we just have to recognize that the text will stimulate and will overstimulate density in our district, and that there has to be some provisions that actually prevent that in a formal way that goes beyond trust us, we're going to take care of it, it's all going to be okay. We don't want DCP, we don't want the City Planning Commission to be the last frontier, you know, against developers bulldozing our blocks and doing massive lot mergers. It wouldn't be fair to the commissioners, it wouldn't be fair to the DCP, and it certainly wouldn't be fair to CB5. So if I understand the room correctly, I think that we're leaning towards a denial unless these provisions are put in place. I think that Dave's comment is actually well taken. We could actually mandate these improvements. The choice that DCP and MTA have made is a more pragmatic and realistic way to say basically it's an incentive rather than a mandate. But maybe we want to underscore that, you know, the mandate route could be an option. And that, you know, there should be a cap to the amount of density that would be created, you know, beyond the size of the development itself. You know, any additional lot merger could create additional density, but it would be capped at a certain point. And then finally, I think everybody is in agreement that MIH should apply to this added density. We are in a huge housing crisis. And, you know, I'm getting rubbed kind of the wrong way when we are advocating desperately for housing and I'm called a NIMBY. I think it's really unfair. And, you know, I'm hoping that housing advocacy groups will, you know, come to join our plea for more housing through this citywide zoning tax amendment. Otherwise, it would be really a lost opportunity. So if that is in agreement with the sentiment of the committee, I'm happy to make a motion to deny unless these provisions are met. And then I would need a second if you guys are.
Second.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments to the motion? I want to make sure that I'm not rushing the vote here. Everybody. I see some hands up. Ryan and Mike, you still have your hands up. Do you wish to make a further comment? I see some heads shaking, so I'll take that for a no. So we can go straight to the vote. I mean, it's only 9:13. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, and this will be our only vote of the evening. Dave.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Andreas.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Tristan.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
EJ.
Yes.
Renee.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Clayton.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
All right, and Leila, I'm a yes. The motion carries, it's a unanimous vote. Thank you so much, guys, for all your hard work. Thank you to MTA and the Department of City Planning for the great presentation. And I wish you all a really good evening, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.